brephrosit et succinct narration de la navigation fate en exexvi et mendexexvi par le capitaine Jacques Cartier les de Canada by Jacques here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques, produced by La Biblia Nationale du Québec and Reynold Levesque. Illustration original relation of Jacques Cartier. Lion. In primary de Louis Perronnet short and succinct account of the navigation made in 1525 and 1526 by Captain Jacques Cartier to the Isles of Canada, and other impression of the rare original edition of 1545, with variants from the manuscripts of the Imperial Library. It preceded by a short and succinct historical introduction by M. de Vezac, Paris Library Trosse, Passages d'Ux Pavillons Palais Royal, no. 1863, a short and succinct historical introduction. No people seems to show less regard for the legitimate part they ought to have in the history of discoveries and explorations of distant lands. None has been so indifferent to the fame their maritime adventures or terrestrial peregrinations might bring them. While other nations sounded their most brilliant fanfare in honor of their own merits, we have allowed the memory of parallel navigations and voyages accomplished with less fanfare by our ancestors to fade away, only occasionally revealing them to us, to our great astonishment, through accounts by foreigners. Who can tell us today what ship this French vessel was that arrived in Canton in 1521, as recorded in the Chinese annals at a time when Portugal and Spain claimed exclusive access to these seas. Many other feats of ours, especially the older ones, have thus disappeared from human memory. Official endeavors patronized by the sovereign are almost the only ones to have escaped this complete oblivion by contemporaries and posterity, but for many of them it has been a struggle to gather even fragments of accounts where they were told. This is precisely the case with the famous Breton navigator, who was the first to plant the French flag at places now occupied by Quebec and Montreal on his 3 voyages to Canada. We are indebted to an Italian collector Remugio for having transmitted to us the account of the first one in a version that we hold to be faithful, and to an English collector Hecklate for saving fragments of the third one in a translation that we assume to be accurate. It is only for the second voyage that we have been able to obtain an original French relation issued by one of Cartier's companions, perhaps even by him himself, of the edition made in Paris in 1545. Bibliographers know of only one copy remaining in Europe, preserved at the British Museum. It was from there that we had to take a perfect copy for lovers of these old relics, so as to reproduce it scrupulously in this thin volume on which we are writing these lines. The coast behind which lie the regions explored for the first time, as far as is known, by the famous Melawin Cartier, had been recognized long before, and tradition has preserved the memory of very ancient settlements in parts of this vast coastline. It extends vis of Western Europe, from the outskirts of the torrid zone to the cold Arctic regions. The children of Green Erin, who nowadays emigrate in such great numbers to the states of the American Union, had, like the Faroe and Ireland, equally proceeded on this extreme margin of the Western Ocean the Scandinavian adventurers, whom they encountered already established everywhere when the Icelandic chief Armarsson, the great-great-grandfather of the learned Frode, was thrown by a storm in 983 onto these distant shores, which the northern sagas have called Island at Mikla, or Great Island. He was collected by a Christian population who baptized and kept him among them. It is there that 16 years later came to take refuge Bjorn Asbrandsson, tearing himself from the love of fair Thurida to flee his brother's wrath, and he had spent 28 years on this foreign land when his compatriot Gulif Gudlangsson landed there, having left Dublin to return to Iceland, driven by northwesterly winds beyond the ocean, surprised to hear the sounds of Erin's language still there, but immediately resuming sea travel, thanks to Bjorn's intervention, and taking from the old exile an golden ring for his beloved Thurida, and a sword for Kiartan, his son whom he had fathered with her. Alongside these vestiges of the ancient transatlantic emigrations of the Irish, their neighbours the Welsh may also have a claim. At least they preserve among them a certain tradition of Madoc's western voyages. Second son of Owen Goengained, one of their princes, fleeing the internal dissensions of his own family, he set out in 170 for an exploratory journey to these distant regions. Chose a place to his liking where he landed 120 men and returned from Europe with a fleet of 10 ships to transport all the elements of a permanent colony to this new settlement. But that is where the old legend ends, and only some Welsh verses from the 15th century have late dedicated the memory of Madoc ap Owen's enterprise. The Scandinavian settlements offer our investigation more certainty, continuity, and duration. The Icelandic Bjarne H.I. Rialson, lost in a dense fog on his way to Greenland, where he was going to meet his father, had seen and approached unknown lands to the west in 1896, from which he returned in 5 days, sailing to the parental home. One day, after several years, he recounted this experience at the Norwegian court, sparking regret that he hadn't conducted a more precise reconnaissance of these new territories. So one of his companions, Leif Erikson, decided to go and complete the discovery, bought Bjarne's ship in the spring of the year 1000, embarked 35 men, and landed on the coast indicated by Bjarne, where he had lost sight of him. It was a rocky and arid plateau, Helluland, which modern scholarship has identified as Newfoundland. They set sail again and went down to the shore after 3 days sailing. In the southwestern region, on a flat and forested land called Markland, marked by the whiteness of its shore sands as nautical charts depict Acadia, then sailing for 2 more days to the southwest, they reached an island near which a peninsula extended to the east and north, much like how Cape Cod protrudes northeast of Nantucket Island today. Leif ventured into the strait, and finding a favorable location beyond, established a settlement by a small river to explore the country at leisure. And since wild grapes grew spontaneously in the area around Leifsbuda, they named this place Vinland, which is now Rhode Island, and the neighboring region. Leif returned to Greenland in the spring of 1001 with a cargo of construction wood, and for 12 years more, brothers Thorwald and Thorstein, along with their sister-in-law Gudrida, remarried to Thorfinn Karlsefne, and finally his brave sister Fridisa, embarked on similar expeditions to Vinland. However, the hostility of the indigenous people caused them to abandon these periodic voyages. Others likely took up the endeavour again, and the settlements established by Leif and Thorfinn eventually became permanent, as the Greenlandic bishop visited in 1121 to cater to the spiritual needs of the colony. The Norse sagas contain a few other traces of the ongoing relationship between Greenland and the opposing coast. In 1266, ships were sent for reconnaissance beyond the farthest fishing stations, reaching what is believed to be the Barrow Strait. In 1285, 2 Icelandic clergymen, Adalbrand and Thorwald Helgason, sailed west to Newfoundland, known at that time as Fundanaya Land, which corresponds to the modern English name Newfoundland. And finally, In 1347, a voyage of 17 Groenlanders to Markland was disrupted on their return by a storm that brought them to Iceland. The account from 1356 indicates that Markland was still frequented by Scandinavians at that time. However, it is no longer mentioned in subsequent Norse histories. A Venetian narrative, discovered after a long period of oblivion, can nonetheless be included as an appendix to these memories of Scandinavian navigation. I refer to fragments of family correspondence from brothers Nicholas and Anthony Zeni, who had settled around 1390 in the Faroe Islands, or Friesland, as it was then called, and sailed these northern seas for about 15 years. The younger one collected from a veteran fisherman the tale of a distant land in the west named Stotterland, where he had been cast by a ferocious storm 26 years earlier, around 1380. The inhabitants maintained regular contact with Greenland, still possessing some Latin books they could no longer understand. After 5 years, he joined an expedition to Drogeo in the south, but a storm set him adrift among another people. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques, of wild cannibals who held him as a slave for many years, until after countless trials and tribulations, he managed to escape their grasp and return to Drogeo, from where he came back to Istotland after 3 years' wait. He then engaged in trade between these two lands, accumulating wealth, and finally concluded his long odyssey by arming a ship himself to return to Friesland. It is still through these increasingly rare but never fully abandoned connections between the Scandinavian nations and the colonies in the Earth West that the memory of this Norwegian pilot, Hans Koeln or Ivan Z. Kolner, that is, John of Kolno in Masovian, survives. He was sent in 1476 to resupply Greenland's stations and reportedly visited the opposite coast, venturing as far as the Great Bay, later known as Hudson Bay. It is natural to assume that a more or less precise, but certain and undisputed notion of the existence of the trans-Atlantic regions so often navigated by northern sailors had persisted among them, and Adam of Bremen's writings prove that this knowledge had even reached the heart of Germany by the 11th century. One would expect it to be all the more vibrant and assured as one moved towards the ports from which the most frequent expeditions set sail. Thus one should not object to the suggestion that during his journey from Iceland in 1477, Christopher Columbus may have gathered on this island clues that led him to believe or confirm in his mind that the Western Ocean could be crossed by daring navigators confident of finding something beyond the accessible shores. Toscanelli's theories had already supported this idea among Portuguese scholars in 1477, and when Columbus learned of them a few years later, around 1481, he no longer hesitated to dedicate himself fully to realizing his grand design to travel by this route to the Far East. But it required immense courage for him to continue begging for ships from the kings of Latin Europe for over 10 more years before he could lead his new white typhus to the conquest of that other golden fleece. Could it be true that a French navigator, Captain Cousin from Dieppe, who was carried west in 1488 to distant, unknown regions, reached or spotted some point along the American coast? Nothing precise can be deduced from the vague clues we have received late about this through insufficient traditions, even if we accept the event as certain. Ultimately, it would simply add another link to the chain of discoveries that culminates on the famous date of 10/4/92, with Europe to the transatlantic hemisphere, which had previously been only visited by chance by predecessors of the immortal Genos. Meanwhile, Columbus still filled with illusions from his cosmographic dreams, struggled to find within the Antilles archipelago, the Saipan, gu and domains of the Great Khan. Here is the translation, while preserving the name Jacques Cartier, marked at this location on a map once sent by Toscanelli, another Italian navigator who had long been established in England at the port of Bristol, Giovanni Cabot, from Venice, having sailed west during one of his voyages, arrived on June 24, 1494, in sight of an unknown land, an island which he named St. John's, after the patron saint of the day, and returned to seek a royal commission that would assure him the privilege of his discoveries under the authority of the Crown of England. This was granted to him by letters patent issued at Westminster on March 5, 1496. He accordingly made a second voyage in 1497 aboard a ship armed in Bristol for King Henry VIII, accompanied by 3 merchant vessels, lasting 3 months, during which he sailed along a coast where no inhabitants were seen, and where he planted the British flag of St. George and the Venetian banner of St. Mark. New royal letters dated February 3, 1498, authorized him to choose up to 6 cargo ships in English ports for transporting colonists to these newly discovered lands and islands, and soon 2 armed vessels at the king's expense, carrying 300 men, set sail for this purpose under Sebastian Cabot, who had accompanied his father on his previous explorations. However, due to the rigor of the season, even though it was July, he lost a significant portion of his crew. Stopped by ice around 56-58 latitude, he sailed down the coast until reaching the Strait of Gibraltar, and with no more provisions, returned to England, bringing back 3 native people who were later presented to the king. The failure of this expedition, his father's death, and perhaps some rival competitions, kept Sebastian Cabot away from these ventures for a long time. After joining Spanish service, but temporarily returning to England upon Ferdinand the Catholic's death, he was not seen again until 1517 on Henry Vieux's ships, when he resumed, alongside Sir Thomas Pert, Vice Admiral of England, an exploration of the coast he had visited 3 times before, reaching a latitude of 6730 on June 11, being forced to give up further discovery due to the commander's timidity and crew opposition, although the sea still seemed open before them. The English discoveries of 1497 and the colonization attempt in 1498 soon became known in Spain and Portugal, raising fears of unexpected competition in the search for riches that were believed to be exclusively theirs, leading to expeditions against these perceived infringements on their rights. Some believe a royal letter dated May 6, 1500 from Seville, along with other ambiguous circumstances, indicates an intended Spanish venture that did not proceed further at the time. Portugal was more proactive. An expedition was immediately planned in response to what they perceived as an intrusion into their claimed rights. In the year 1500, by King Emmanuel, a grant was made to Gaspard Cortriel, who set sail from Turksey with 2 ships and first advanced as for 50 degrees of latitude or beyond. He explored up to a river laden with ice known as Rio Nevado, the great land that was then named after him and is now referred to as Labrador. Returning fortunately to Lisbon, he departed again the following year with his 2 ships, heading west-northwest. He discovered land approximately 2,000 miles away and travelled along a coast lined with numerous rivers and vast forests for around 600-700 miles, which he assumed was an extension of what he had seen in the north the previous year, but was unable to reach this time due to the ice. country was heavily populated, and he did not hesitate to take a number of inhabitants, keeping 50 on his ship and placing 8 more on his second caravel. This second vessel returned to Lisbon on October 8, 1501, while the other, expected daily, never reappeared. Michel Courteril decided to search for his brother and set sail in the spring of 1502 with 3 ships to explore all the rivers along the coast separately. He scheduled a general meeting at a predetermined location on August 20 for their return, but did not meet up with them. The other 2 ships, after waiting in vain, returned alone to Portugal, where no further news was heard of his fate. In the meantime, other Portuguese from the Azores, John Gonçalves, Jean and François Fernandez, partnered with shipowners from Bristol Richard Ward, Thomas Hursty, and John Thomas for an exploration expedition in these regions. They obtained letters of privilege from King Henry V on March 9, 1501, for this purpose, which resulted in at least 2 voyages being carried out that same year and the following one. At the end of the latter, a new partnership was formed for the same objective between the 2 Portuguese, Jane Gonçalves Alves and François Fernandez, and the Bristol shipowners, Hugues Elliot and Thomas Ashurst. They also received royal letters on December 9, 1502, which led to successive voyages in 1503, 1504, and 1505, as indicated by some records of expenses from King Henry VC's private treasury. It can be inferred that new colonization attempts were being made at this time, as a priest was part of the 1504 expedition. On the French side, they also explored the seas bordering the eastern coast of both Americas during this period. Without delving into their Australian voyages, let us simply mention their fishing expeditions and private explorations in these regions, where royal authority would eventually publicly recognize their efforts. We will not even attempt to gather simple traditions or vague pointers. Worthy or not of serious consideration, we aim to stick to explicit and formal testimonies. We must turn to the Italian collection of Ramusio to find, beneath a foreign garb, with the pompous title of Great Sea Captain, a Frenchman from Dieppe, in whom we recognize the astronomer and navigator Pierre Crignon, who accompanied the brothers Parmentier on their 1529 voyage to Sumatra, and had also sailed along the coasts of Brazil and Newfoundland. In describing this latter, which stretches continent and islands between 40 and 60 latitude, he notes the break at Cape Ras between the direction of the southern coast veering west and that of the northern coast running north. The Portuguese are credited with discovering approximately 70 leagues of covering coastline between Cape Ras and Cape Ovista. Everything south of Cape Ras was explored in 1504 by their Normans and Bretons, who left their names to a well-known cape. Everything north of Cape Beau Vista was similarly surveyed by the aforementioned Normans and Bretons. Captain Jean-Denis from Honfleur, with navigator Camart from Rouen, sailed his ship there in 1506 and reportedly returned with a detailed map. Then in 1508, Captain Thomas Albert, commanding the vessel La Pensi, armed by Jean Angot, father of the famous governor of Dieppe, transported the first Norman colonists there. 10 years later, in 1518, following a common interpretation, but perhaps in reality several years later, a similar expedition was undertaken by Lord de L.A. Ryan Saint Just, Viscount de Guen, who, having the courage to strive for greatness, desired to establish himself beyond and begin a settlement for François. He had procured men and livestock and set sail for Sable Island opposite the Breton fisheries. But the length of the voyage having kept him at sea too long, he was forced to unload his livestock, cows, eggs, disappeared due to lack of fresh water and pastures. This abortive expedition had no other result than to introduce animals to this arid land, which gradually multiplied and became, years later, an unexpected resource for other Frenchmen who, through a sea fortune, were condemned to stay there for 5 entire years in deplorable conditions. Up until then, these had been private expeditions. Finally, the King of France decided to take his place in the division of overseas lands, left unchecked to European Western sovereigns, and officially sent his own expedition to discover trans-Atlantic countries where he would establish a foothold. The time had passed when one believed they had found Japan, China, and Asia's Indies in these regions, Cabot's voyages in the north. As those of Vespucci in the south had demonstrated that it was actually a new world, although it was believed to join its northern limits by the Asian boreal regions. The Spanish conquest to the west and Magellan's circumnavigation revealed that there was another sea beyond this new continent leading to the true east, so rich and full of wonders, some passage, less distant than the strait crossed by the Castilian fleet, might exist along the immense line of American coasts, and lead to these Spice Islands, the object of so many rival desires. Francis I, in 1523, put 4 ships under the command of the Florentine Gian Verrazzano to seek out such a passage and take possession of the lands where it might be found. But a storm thwarted the initial attempts. The vicissitudes of war and sea did not allow the navigator to complete his exploration until a second campaign with only 1 ship, the Dauphin, from which he departed definitively from Madeira on January 17, 1524, to land towards the end of February at about 34 degrees latitude on an unknown coast that he followed for 50 leagues heading south without discovering any bays. This led him to head north and then follow the coastline east and northeast until reaching 4140, descending to shore in intervals to explore the country where vines grew abundantly and the inhabitants, generally dark-skinned with hospitable manners. He finally encountered a large river with deep waters and picturesque shores, the Hudson, from which a sudden storm forced him to retreat, to only stop again after another 80-league run straight east, where he found a triangular island similar to Rhodes, which he named Louise after the mother of the King of France, behind which opened a convenient bay called Narragansett, inhabited by a population much whiter than any other, and who welcomed him very warmly. After enjoying this gracious hospitality for 15 days, he resumed his journey on May 6, following a coast that gradually rose and was covered with thick forests, inhabited by a brown and fierce people, than a bare and rocky land bordered by numerous islands. Until reaching 50 degrees latitude, having used up all his supplies and provisions, he returned to France and wrote an account of his voyage from the port of Dieppe on July 8, 1524, which he sent to the king. It is said that during a subsequent expedition to these same areas, Verrazzano, upon landing without sufficient caution, was captured by the natives and served as food at a horrible feast. Whether he immediately received a new mission from Francis I is unknown. Other concerns had consumed the monarch's thoughts, and the prisoner of Pavia soon had no leisure to think about it. For a long time, Jacques pursued his plans for establishing himself overseas. In contrast, Spain triumphed, and by October 18th, 1524, Fernán Cortés sent a report to Emperor Charles V from Mexico outlining the idea of exploring both the Atlantic coast from Florida to the Bacalhaos and the opposite coast on the Pacific Ocean in search of the secret passage that Verrazzano had discovered. A Portuguese pilot in Spanish service, Esteban Gomes de Porto, who was a deserter from Magellan's expedition and rejected by Loises, obtained permission in Seville at the end of the same year to explore, following in Verrazano's footsteps the coastline between Florida and the Bacalhaos. Count Fernand d'Andrade, Dr. Beltram, and wealthy Christophe de Haro provided him with a small ship with which he set sail from Corunna at the beginning of 1525, touching down in Cuba and Florida's tip, and exploring particularly the coast between 40 and 41 latitude, capturing many inhabitants to enslave them. He then continued his navigation, reportedly reaching Cape Raz, and returned after an absence of 10 months, disarming Calming in Corunna before heading to Lido in November, preceded by false news that he had brought back cloves, whereas he actually brought only slaves, a misunderstanding born from an unintentional wordplay that had replaced esclavos with clavos. The Spanish cartographers named the land he had explored and pillaged Tierra de Esteban Gomez, between Licenciado Locke Vasca territory and Brelan's territory, Breton fishing grounds. Meanwhile, the English renewed their efforts. A wealthy Bristol merchant settled in Seville, son of one of Hugh Elliot's associates in the 1503 expedition to Newfoundland, Robert Thorne, who had recently invested significantly in Sebasti's southern venture in 1526, sent a memorial to King Henry V shortly afterward, highlighting the advantage England would have over Spain and Portugal if it discovered a passage through the northwest to the Spice Islands. At the invitation of Reverend Edward Lee, sent by Henry V to Charles V, he presented detailed considerations on the same subject to the ambassador. Regardless of the influence these writings may have had on royal decisions, 2 ships, Samson and Mary from Guildford, left the Thames on May 20, 1527, and set sail from Plymouth on June 10th under John Rutt's command, heading north until July 1st, when they were attacked by a violent storm. The tempest separated them, likely sinking the Samson, which never reappeared. 2 days later, at 53 latitude, the Mary, battered by ice, descended towards 52, where she spotted land. She reached a sheltered harbour and stopped for 10 days to make repairs. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jack's Water, as per the initial agreement for both ships in case of accidental separation. They met at Cape Spur knew where they were there to expect each other for 6 weeks. Rutt steered south to reach them and arrived in St. John's Bay on August 3rd, finding 11 Norman fishing ships, 1 Breton, and 2 Portuguese there. He wrote to the king reporting these events, while the mathematician of the expedition, Albert de Prato, canon of St. Paul in London, wrote to Cardinal Wolsey, the papal legate, on August 10th. The subsequent traces of this aborted expedition can be found in Spanish historians of the West Indies. They mention the appearance of an English ship in the Antilles, armed at the same time as another ship bound for the land of the Great Khan, separated from its companion by a storm, halted by ice, then sailing to the Bacalhaos, where it encountered up to 50 Spanish, French, and Portuguese fishing vessels, having witnessed the murder by natives on an inhospitable shore of its pilot, possibly Albert de Prato, already mentioned. The ship then proceeded along the coast until it reached Chicora River, heading for Jamaica, turned back from Santo Domingo due to cannon fire, and finally returned to England. Hakluyt was able to gather, years later, from some contemporaries that the ship leaving the Thames on May 10th, 1527, returned to port around of October of the same year. When the Peace of Cambrai gave King Francis I the leisure to consider the administration of his kingdom, he could resume his plans for exploration and settlement in the new hemisphere. It was another way to compete with his arrogant and prosperous rival. He thus favoured the request from a ship's captain from St. Malo, Cartier, addressed to Philip de Chabot, Lord of Brian, Count of Buzan, Oise and Charny, Admiral of France in 1533, asking to be sent on behalf of the king to continue the discovery and colonization enterprise entrusted 9 years earlier to Gen Verrazano. 2 ships of 60 tons each, with 61 crew members each, were placed under his command, and Vice Admiral Charles de Mouy, Lord of Le Mailleret, having taken the oath for all expeditionary forces on behalf of the king, they set sail from St. Malo on April 20th, 1534, reaching Terra Neuve near Cape Bovista on May 10th of that year. They sailed 5 leagues south and anchored in a port named Sainte Catherine. They then went up the coast north to enter Chiu Gulf, or Belle Isle Strait, as it is now known, and the name Sainte Catherine, which may have been one of the ship's names, appeared again to designate the very island marking this entrance. From there, Cartier sailed west along the southern coast of Labrador, naming various locations. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques is his road from certain Breton names, such as Brest or Saint Servan, amidst many others, leading to the Bay of Chicatica, which was later called Cartier's Port. As the Gulf continued to widen, he wanted to explore the opposite shore and sailed towards Cape Double, now known as Point to Rich, then followed the coast down to a cape reached on June 24th, named Cape St. Jean for that reason, now known as Cap de l'Anguille. Turning west from there, they encountered various islands, one of which was named Brian in honor of the great admiral who had sponsored the expedition and arrived at the river of Barkis, Miramichi. They then headed north, exploring Bay des Chaleurs, whose entrance is marked beyond by Cape Prato, now Cape Farallon, where one might be tempted to seek a memory of the Piedmontese pilot massacred during the English expedition of 1527. After cutting through the Stay Pierre Strait between Gaspé and Anticosti, they regained the northern lands near the residence of the wild chief Tierno, at present-day Cape Montjoli, and now taking the east for their return journey. They crossed Belle Isle Strait on Assumption Day and returned to St. Malo on September 5th. Cartier's immediate report on the outcomes of this first voyage was well received, and just a month later, on October 30th, the Grand Admiral sent him a new commission under his own seal, with the will and command of the king to conduct, lead, and employ 3 equipped sailors supplied with provisions for 15 months in completing the navigation, already begun beyond new lands, and in this voyage to attempt and accomplish what it has pleased his said Lord, to command and order. With everything arranged for his new mission, Cartier set off from St. Malo on May 19, 1535. Disappointingly, winds hindered his crossing, and he arrived at Daily, Ox on July 7th, from where he headed to Belle Isle Strait to wait for his 2 lieutenants, who joined him on July 26. He then took a western route towards Cape Tierno, reaching it on July 31st, and continued along the same path until August 10th at the entrance of the present Des Saint Jean River, which he named Bay de Saint Laurent in honor of the patron of the day. Subsequently, he went to visit the large island of Natascotic, or Anticosti, as it is commonly pronounced, and landed there on August 15th, naming it Assumption Island. To the south, it faced the land of Honguido, where the great river began that led to Canada and Hochelaga, which he decided to ascend, resuming his exploration from the northern shore since Bay St. Laurent. He first encountered 7 islands, which he called the Round Islands, then the Big Islands, naming them Lettres de Saint Jean on September 1st. He recognized the entrance of the great Saguenay River and its 2 islands, L'Île Blanche. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques, the red island La Rouge, which faced him. Continuing his journey, he stopped on September 6th on an island covered in fir trees, still known as Isle Arcs Coudres, and the following day he reached a group of islands marking the beginning of Canada's land. The largest one was laden with vines, earning it the initial name of El de Bacchus, but he later chose the name Île d'Orléans, which it retains to this day. At the end of the group lay an ideal spot for anchoring his ships. He stopped there on September 14th, the feast day of the exaltation of the Holy Cross, from which this place took its name. It is now known as the St. Charles River. Nearby was Stadacone, the royal residence of the Canada chief, replaced now by the city of Quebec, with its St. Jean suburb located precisely where the old capital of the wild inhabitants once stood. After ensuring the safety of his ships in the Sainte-Croix harbour, Cartier decided to explore further up the river towards Hochelaga, using the smallest of his 3 vessels and boats. He set sail on September 19th and sailed uninterrupted until September 28th, when he reached the lands of Chief Ochelay at the entrance to a river with a swift and dangerous current now known as the Richelieu River, and soon after a vast lake formed by the rivers widening the present Des Lake Saint Pierre. There he had to abandon the ship and continue with just the boats, reaching Hochelaga on October 28th, below the fierce rapids later named Sainte Marie's Current. The capital was situated at the foot of a well-cultivated mountain, which was named Mont Royal. This name has been preserved in the same location, evolving into Montreal, as we now call the capital of Upper Canada. On his descent back to the Great River, he noted on October 7th a tributary from the northern shore marked by 4 small wooded islands, which he named Fouez, meaning Foix, later replaced by Trois Rivières. 4 days later, he returned to the Sainte-Croix harbour, where the sailors of the 2 ships left at anchor had built a fort in his absence. He spent the entire winter there, severely afflicted by scurvy, losing 15 of his companions, and it could have caused even greater damage if not for the indigenous people teaching him a superior remedy through the infusion of white spruce leaves and bark, Pinus alba of Linnaeus, or Canada hemlock Tsuga canadensis. Finally, on May 6th, 1536, Cartier set sail to return to France, abandoning one of his ships due to a lack of men to roam it. Its remains were discovered in the mud by Quebec residents on September 26, 1843, and some fragments were sent as precious relics to the St. Malo Museum. On May 21st, Cartier sighted Honguido, followed by Prato Cape, from where he reached the Bryan Island, and on June 1st, taking a southeast course, he touched upon 2 land points that he named Lorraine Cape and Cap. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques St. Paul to the north and east of Cape Breton Island. He then landed in Newfoundland in a bay that he named the Haven of the Holy Spirit, which is now known as the Bass Port. He followed the coast until he reached St. Peter's Islands, where he encountered several French ships. Finally, after leaving the Rognos Haven, or Bay of the Dead, he returned to St. Malo on July 16th of the following year. While Cartier was making his return journey, he encountered an English expedition consisting of 2 ships, the Trinity and the Mignon, commanded by a group of distinguished individuals from court and the magistracy, united under the leadership of Master Hall, a man of great courage and a keen student of cosmography. Their mission was to attempt discoveries in the northwest. Setting sail from London at the end of April 1536, it took them over 2 months to reach Cape Breton, after which they sailed to Penguin Island and ventured far north amidst the ice. However, their food supplies ran low, leaving them near starvation. When a well-stocked French ship appeared, they managed to capture it through deceit and quickly retreated back to England, arriving at the end of October. The French who had robbed them could only be caught up with several months later, and King Henry VI decided to compensate them with his own funds. In France, Cartier had brought back some Canadian natives. Efforts were made to instruct them in order to find interpreters and helpers for the civilization of their compatriots. They were baptized on March 25th, 1538, but the change in climate proved fatal, and all but one, a young girl, perished before any useful service could be extracted from them. Despite this disappointment, a new expedition was organized with the active involvement of a Picard gentleman, Jean-François de la Roque, Seigneur de Roberval, whom the king appointed lieutenant general in the new lands of Canada, Hochelaga, Saguenay, and other surrounding areas by letters dated January 15th, 1540. Royal letters issued at St. Prix on October 17th following year named Cartier as Captain General and Master Pilot of all ships and vessels to be sent for this endeavor. 5 ships totaling 400 tons were properly equipped, and Cartier set sail from St. Malo on May 23rd, 1541, leaving Roberval behind in France, who was to join him soon with the remaining supplies for the planned settlement. On August 23rd, Cartier reached the haven of Sainte-Croix, but preferred a different location for his ship's winter. 4 leagues further, at the entrance to a river near Cape Rouge, where he constructed a fort and stores, naming it Royal Charlesbourg. He then sent 2 of his ships back to France under the command of Macchigialo, but his brother-in-law and Tynan Noel, his nephew, who departed on September 10th. Cartier himself. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques recognized. Above Hochelaga, the jumps or rapids that block the course of the river, he returned to winter at the fort, and with no news from Roberval by the end of May 1542, he decided to return to France. After stopping at St. John's Harbour under Double Cape, he met Roberval, who finally arrived with 2 ships, but he refused to join him and went to disarm in St. Malo, where he is seen October 21st, baptizing the son of the king's lieutenant governor of this city. A short time later, following the king's order, recalling Roberval to France. Cartier left once again from St. Malo in the spring of 1543 to retrieve the remains of this aborted expedition, and returned definitively to St. Malo after an absence of 8 months. The idea of a French establishment in Canada was thus abandoned for over half a century. After reviewing all European navigations towards the transatlantic shores of the Northwest, from the earliest traditions that have reached us to the latest ones featuring Cartier's name, we have little left to say about the famous Maloan navigator and the fragments that have been gathered from his accounts. An old saint, Malo sailor, filled with zeal and patriotism, Charles Cunett rekindled the vigorous ardor of his youth to sift through all sorts of archives available in his beloved hometown, and what he did not find there, no one else likely could have discovered. As far as he managed to delve into existing civil records, he encountered a Jacques Cartier who, upon marrying Guillemette Bedoin, had 6 children, among whom the eldest, Jamet or Jacques, born on December 4th, 1458, had in turn a son born on December 31st, 1494, who is none other than the famous navigator Cartier himself. Married in 1519 to Catherine des Granches, daughter of Jean des Granches, constable of the city and town of Saint-Malo, he left no descendants. After giving up navigation, he lived during winter in Saint-Malo in a house located next to St. Thomas Hospital, but no trace remains of it since long ago. He spent summers in the seigneurial domain of Limoilou, at the village so named where his castle still bears the name Portis Cartier. He had to defend himself after Roberval's return against a claim demanding an accounting of the monies he had spent on the joint and enterprise. It was established that he had put in more than he had received, and the ruling of the Admiralty Court on June 21st, 1544, gave him judgment in all points. He disappears after 1552, leading to the conclusion that he likely died before reaching his 60th year. Did he write himself the accounts of the various expeditions he led Canada? It can be supposed so. Here is the translation preserving the name Abe Jacques to think of it, even though he is always referred to in the third person, much like Julius Caesar in his immortal commentaries. In any case, the author clearly took part in each of the expeditions described. A renowned Italian collector who had obtained various French accounts, of which nothing remains to us today except the version he published, Remugio, collected that of Jacques Cartier's first voyage. It is only in his precious collection, as we recalled at the beginning, that one must seek, under its strange disguise, a narrative of great interest to us. This Italian version, first published in Venice in 1556, was printed in 1565 and 1613. It was translated back into French and published in Rouen in 1598 by Raphael du Petit-Val, the king's bookseller and printer, in a small Avo volume of 64 pages, titled Discourse on the Voyage made by Captain Jacques Cartier to the New Lands of Canada, Nuremberg, Hokelage, Labrador, and adjacent countries, known as New France, with particular accounts of the customs, language, and ceremonies of its inhabitants. Lescarbot reprinted it with questionable accuracy in his History of New France book, i.e., Chapters IV, which has 4 editions from 609 to 1618. The Archives des Voyages de Turnox companies reproduced it accurately in 1840 in their first volume, pages 1753. Finally, the Société littéraire et historique de Quebec included it in a collection of reprinting dedicated to discovery voyages to Canada between 1534 and 1542, published in Quebec 1843. This excerpt occupies the first 23 pages. Unfortunately, not all of Lescarbot's inaccuracies were rectified. As we mentioned at the beginning, it is thanks to Richard Hecklett, an English collector from Oxford, that we have retained, in an English version, the mutilated fragments he managed to obtain during his stay in France 1584-1588 regarding Cartier's third voyage. First, the navigator's incomplete account, then a letter from his grandnephew, Noel, written from St. Malo on June 19, 1587, and a fragment of a second letter from the same stating that all searches within the family to find a more complete account had been fruitless. Hacklett printed the continuation in English, the route map of the journey from Belle Isle to 230 leagues upstream on the Canada River, drafted by Jane Alphonse, a master pilot from Saint Onge near Cognac in 1542, and finally Robertval's own account, though incomplete, carried out as far as July 22, 1543, a date likely close to when Cartier came to look for him according to the king's orders. Hakluyt published this material in his volume of 1600 pages 232-242. It naturally appears in the 1812 reprint. The Literary and Historical Society of Quebec has gathered all these fragments from Hakluyt and retranslated them into French, inserting them in 1843 within the volume we mentioned above. As for the account of the second voyage, which interests us more specifically here, it is, as is known, the only one that possesses the original French text. There exists an edition printed in Paris in 1545 in a single volume of 48 small sheets a pivot, so rare that bibliographers are only aware of a single copy in Europe. A meticulous and illustrated reproduction of this unique copy was attempted by a publisher well versed in the search and handling of curious books. Thus, the amatory edition began, with an introduction whose final page we are currently writing. This unattainable volume, which had escaped all searches, was so little known that one had only a very false idea of its contents in the Literary and Historical Society of Quebec in 1843, as well as Mr. Turnox Compans in 1841 considered it to be the original French text of the account of the first voyage instead of the second. For this latter, there was only one other known publication besides Lescarbot's History of New France book, i.e., chapters V to V, XI to XVIant and XA to XV, where Cartier's voyage is fragmented and intercut with disjointed fragments from Champlain's voyage. However, in the Imperial Library in Paris, there are 3 handwritten copies of this same account by Cartier under numbers 59, 5 and 60, 44, and 5 and 60, 3. Missa. Champans had access to the first 2, from which he made a copy that he printed in 1841 at the beginning of the second volume of his Archives des Voyages, pages 5 to 66. The Literary and Historical Society of Quebec, having taken a copy of the third manuscript and collated it with the other 2, as well as with Lescarbot's extracts, reproduced it in their volume from 1843, pages 24 to 669. The original edition of 1545 cannot be presented as free from errors, far from it. Typographical errors are frequent therein, and the modern editor might have been justified in hesitating to reproduce so faithfully all its accidental imperfections, were he not to find a remedy for this drawback in carefully noting down as an appendix to the present reissue the necessary corrections, along with variants not only of the manuscripts, but also from Lescarbot's fragments and Turnox, Compans and Quebec Society's editions, whose readings are not always preferable to those of the 1545 edition. This expedient seemed to us to give this very edition the advantage of preserving intact, according to the bibliomaniac's imperious taste, the antique appearance of the original, while putting at the disposal of those who attach only secondary importance to form the elements for a more correct and faithful text than any other. New Illy, Sir Sign, August 12, 1863. Page 1, short account, translation, a concise narrative of voyages to the islands of Canada, Hoculage, Saguenay, and others, with particular accounts of their inhabitants' customs, language, and ceremony is most delightful to observe, illustration by privilege. Sold in Paris at the second pillar in the Grand Hall of the Palace and on Rue Neuf Notre Dame at the sign of the Escud de France by Ponce Rosset, nicknamed Fortier, and Antoine Leclerc, brothers, in 1545. To Monseigneur, the Provost of Paris, or his civil lieutenant, humbly Ponce Rosset, nicknamed Fortier, and Antoine Leclerc, brothers and booksellers of this city. Of Paris, beg your grace to grant them permission to print and sell a book entitled Concise Narrative of Voyages to the Islands of Canada and other matters contained therein, the printing of which will entail significant expense and effort on their part, and they fear being frustrated if everyone is allowed to do so. Considering this, please order that no other printers or booksellers in Paris be permitted to print or sell this book, except the aforementioned supplicants for a period of 4 years from now, under penalty of confiscating their books and imposing arbitrary fines. You will do well. These supplicants are also granted permission, along with all others, to refrain from printing the said Voyage for 3 years. Done on the last day of February, 1544. Signed, I, Morin, to the King reflecting, O most esteemed Prince, upon the great benefits and grace that God the Creator has bestowed upon his creatures, and among other things, placing and establishing the sun, which is life and knowledge for all of them, and without which no one can flourish or generate in any location where its movement and declination are not felt. By these movements and declinations, all creatures on earth, wherever they may be, have or can have equal visible experience, you of the sun, the said 365 days and 6 hours, not because it is so extremely hot and intense in some places compared to others, due to its roots and reflections, nor because of the equal division of days and nights, but rather because it has such a strong and balanced temperament that all the earth can be or become inhabited in any zone, climate, or parallel. And these, along with water, trees, herbs, and other creatures of various kinds or species, are nurtured by the said sun's influence, bearing fruit and generations according to their nature, through the life and nourishment of human beings. If anyone wishes to argue against this, citing certain past wise philosophers who have written and divided the earth into 5 zones, claiming 3 of them to be uninhabitable, then let it be known the torrid zone located between. Here is the translation of the text with the name preserved as a Jacques. The 2 tropics or solstices which pass through the zenith of heads of the inhabitants, page 3 of that place, and the 2 polar zones for the extreme coldness therein, due to the little elevation they have from the said sun and other reasons, he confesses that they have written about it in this manner, and firmly believes that they think so, and that they find no natural reason or foundation for it, and they merely stay within their limits without putting their persons in danger, which they might have done by seeking to test these things. But I say in reply that the prince of these philosophers has left among writings a word of great consequence, which says experience is the teacher of things, by which instruction I dared to present this proposal to your royal sight in the form of a prologue to this humble work, following your royal command. The simple sailors at present have not had such fear of putting themselves at risk from these dangers as they once did, and they desire to render you most humble service for the advancement of the holy Christian faith, and they know the contrary of that philosophical opinion by real experience. I allege this because I consider that the sun, which rises each day in the east and sets in the west, makes a circle around the earth, giving light and heat to all within 24 hours, which is a natural day without any interruption of its movement, or course page 4. Following this example, I believe with my feeble understanding, and without adding any other reason, that it pleases God, through his divine goodness, that all human creatures, being and dwelling beneath the globe of the earth, should have knowledge and recognition of that sun for the future, just as they have seen and known it. For first, our holy faith was sown and planted on the Holy Land, which is in Asia to the east of Europe. And since then, through successive time, it has been brought and disseminated until us, and finally to the west of our Europe, following the example of that sun carrying its heat and light from the east to the west as it does. And similarly, we have seen our holy faith on several occasions during the occasion of evil heretics and false legislators, eclipses in various places, and suddenly it has relapsed and become darker than before. And now, at present, we see how the wicked Lutherans, apostates and imitators of Muhammad, day after day strive to oppress that faith. And finally, if God and the true supporters of that faith do not intervene with deadly justice, as one sees happening every day in your country and kingdom through good order and police, they will completely extinguish it. Similarly, one also sees how, on the contrary, poor Christians, true pillars of the Catholic Church, strive to increase and spread that faith, as did the Catholic King of Spain in page 5 lands that, by his command, have been discovered in the west beyond his countries and kingdoms, which were previously unknown to us, strange, and outside our faith, such as New Spain, Lisabel, mainland, and other islands where innumerable peoples have been found who have been baptized and reduced to our most holy faith. And now, on this present voyage undertaken by your royal command in the discovery of western lands, situated under the same climates and parallels as your countries and kingdoms, unknown to you and us until now, you will be able to see and know the goodness and felicity of these lands, the innumerable quantity of peoples who inhabit them, and the wealth of the great river that flows down and irrigates their soil, which is the greatest ever seen. These things give those who have seen them a sure hope for the future growth of our holy faith and your lordships in the most Christian name, as you will see in this present small book, to which all things worthy of memory from what we saw and experienced during that voyage while staying and residing in your countries and lands are fully contained. On the Sunday feast day of Pentecost, the 4th day of May, in the year 1535, under the command of the captain and with the goodwill of all, each one confessed, and we all together used our Creator in the Cathedral Church of St. Malo. After this, having received absolution, we presented ourselves to the heart of that same church before the venerable Father in God, Monsieur de St. Malo, who gave us his blessing. And on the following Wednesday, the 90th day of May, the wind was good and suitable, and we set sail with 3 ships, the Grand Herman from the port, about 160 tons, where the Captain General was, and Master Thomas Frosman, Claude Pont Bryant, son of Monsieur de Montreal and Esconson, of his Lordship the Dauphin, Charles de la Pommeraye, Jehan Pollitt, and other gentlemen. The second ship, named the Petite Herman from the port, about 60 tons, had captain under the said Cartier Mace Jalobert and Master Guillaume Le Marie. And the third ship, named the Emerillon from the port, about 40 tons, had Captain Guillaume Le Breton and Master Maingart. We sailed with good weather until the 20th day of May, when it turned into a storm that lasted for winds against us, and we were tossed about as much as any ship that ever crossed the sea would have been without amendment to such an extent that on the 25th day of June, because of the bad weather and tossing, we all became separated, having had no news from each other until we reached new land, where we had all met together once more. And since then, we have remained separated, with the general ship battling all kinds of winds for 7 days in July, when we finally arrived to the aforementioned land, 9 and pristine, at the island of the sea birds, which is 14 leagues from the mainland. This island is so flat with sea, birds that all ships from France could easily load there without anyone noticing they had taken any, and we seized 2 boats as part of our provisions. That island lies in the elevation of the pole at 49 degrees, 40 minutes north. On the 8th day of said month, we set sail from that island, and with fair weather arrived at the white sand beach abbey at Des Chastelecs on the 15th, which is the place where we were to rendezvous. We waited for our companions there until the 26th of said month, when they all arrived together. We prepared and loaded water, buoys, and other necessary items, and on the 29th day of said month, at dawn, we set sail again, following the north coast, lying north, east, and south, west until about 8 o'clock in the evening, when the sails lowered. We passed through 2 islands that project further than the others, which we called St. Guillaume Islands, approximately 20 leagues beyond Brest. The entire coastline from the Chasteluks to this point lies north, east, and southwest, with numerous islands and rocky land, without any smooth or good harbour, except in some valleys. The following day, on the penultimate day of said month, we set out towards the north-east to make contact with other islands about 12.5 leagues away. Between these islands, there is a stretch heading north, all islands, and a broad channel apparently leading to several good harbours, which we called St. Martha Islands. Approximately 1.5 leagues out to sea, there is a low, very dangerous shore where 4 or 5 rocks remain across the said bays in the northeast direction of these St. Martha Islands, about 7 leagues away. We reached these islands on that same day about an hour after noon. From that day until sunset, we sailed around 15 leagues through a stretch of low islands, which we called St. Germain Islands, with another very dangerous shore approximately 3 leagues further east. Similarly, between the St. Germain and St. Martha Capes, there is a bank off these islands about 2 leagues wide with only 4 fathoms of water. Due to the dangers of this coastline, we did not attempt to cross it that night. The following day, on the last day of July, we sailed along the coast, which lies east-northeast. Very dangerous and strewn with islands and low shores, it stretches from the St. Germain Islands Cape to the end of these islands, approximately 17.5 leagues long. At the end of these islands, there is a very beautiful low shore. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name the Jacques, plain of grand trees and heights, and this coast along page 8 is lined with sandbanks without any appearance of a harbour, as far as Cape Theanot, which curves over to the northeast side, about 7 leagues from the said islands. We know this cape from the previous voyage, and since we had spent the entire night at North Island, Noronest, some 7 leagues beyond Cape Theanot, and sought a harbour for our ships, which is a good small haven, we named it St. Nicholas Harbour, situated about 7.5 leagues beyond Cape Theanot, between 4 islands that project into the sea. On the nearest island, we erected a wooden cross for sailing, and you must bear this cross due north, then seek it out and leave it on the shore, where you will find it 6 fathoms deep. There are 2 small islets about half a league away from both sides. All of this coast is very dangerous and filled with shallows. However, there appear to be several good harbours, but in reality, there are only shallows and flats. We were at this harbour since that day until the 7th day of August Sunday. On that day we set sail and headed towards land beyond Cape Rabast, which is about 20 leagues northerly from the said harbour, and just south of North Island. The next day the wind turned against us. Since we found no harbours on that land to the south, we sailed further north for about 10 leagues beyond the previous harbour, where we discovered a very beautiful and vast bay, filled with islands and excellent anchors suitable for all winds. For recognition of this bay, there is a large island resembling a cape, jutting out farther than the others, and on land. About 2 leagues away there is a mountain shaped like a heap of sand, which we named St. Lawrence Bay. On the 12th day of that month we left St. Lawrence Bay and sailed to North Island. We then were headed towards land to the south, some 25 leagues from St. Lawrence Bay, where we discovered another cape. Through the 2 wild animals we had caught on our first voyage, we were told that this was the said land to the south, an island, and that by sailing south from it we would reach Hongedo, or Canada, as we had done previously. They also informed us that in 2 days' journey from this cape and island, the kingdom of Saguenay begins on land heading north towards Canada. At the narrowest point across the cape, there is a depth of over 100 fathoms. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques of lands that we explored towards the south, which is a land of high mountains and marvels. There lies a cape from the aforementioned island, which we call the Island of Assumption, and another cape from these highlands to northeast and west with a distance of 25 leagues between them. And one can see even further north, still higher lands than those in the south, more than 30 leagues away. We explored these lands towards the south from that day until Tuesday, when the wind turned west, and also surveyed the northern cape to seek these high lands that we saw. And while we were there, we found these lands joined and low towards the sea, and the mountains facing north on top of those high lands at a distance about a league from the coast. To the east and northeast lies a vast expanse of land, and through the natives we learned that this was the beginning of the Saguenay and a habitable land. It is from here that the red copper, which they call Cagnetes, comes. There are approximately 30 leagues between the lands to the south and those of the north, with more than 200 fathoms of depth. The natives confirmed these are the path and beginning of the great silence of Hochelaga and the route to Canada, which always led to a river until they found the sweet water that flows so far that no man had ever reached its end, and there was no other passage but by canoe. Upon hearing their words and their affirmation that there was no other passage, the captain did not want to go further beyond having seen the rest of this land and the coast facing north until he had knowledge of Lawrence Bay to see if there is any passage towards the north. How our captain turned the ships around and headed back, waiting for knowledge of Lawrence Bay to see if there was a passage towards the north. On Tuesday, the 18th day of August, our captain turned his ships around and steered them towards the other side. We explored the coast facing north, which lies northeast and southwest, forming a half circle, a land quite high, but not as much as that to the south. On Thursday, we reached 7 very high islands, which we named the Round Islands, located about 40 leagues from the lands to the south, extending out towards the sea for 3 or 4 leagues. Across these islands is a beginning of low, flat land with beautiful trees. We explored this land on Friday using our boats, across which there are several banks of sand over 2 leagues from the sea, very dangerous as they reveal themselves at low tide. At the end of these lowlands, which extend about 10 leagues, there is a river of fresh water flowing into the sea, so wide that at a distance of more than 1 league from it, the water is as clear as a spring. We entered this river in our boats, and we found at the entrance of this river a breach and half. Inside this river there are several fish that look like horses. They go to the land at night and to the sea during the day, as our 2 savages told us. And we saw a great number of these fish in the said river. The following day, the 2nd of the month, at dawn, we made a sound and travelled along the coast until we had seen the rest of this northern coast that we hadn't noticed before, and the island of Assumption, which we set out to explore when leaving this land. When we were certain that the coast was blocked and there was no passage, we returned to our ships, which were in these 7 islands, where there is good anchorage at 10 to 20 fathoms of sand, a place where we couldn't go ashore or make noise because of the strong gales and contrary winds that lasted till the 23rd day of the said month, when we arrived at a harbour on the north coast, about 48 leagues from these 7 islands, which is across 3 flat islands located along the river. And approximately halfway between these islands and the aforementioned harbour, there is a very large river that lies between high and low lands. It forms several bars extending more than 3 leagues into the sea, which is a very dangerous place with depths of 2 fathoms or less. At the crest of these bars you will find 25 to 30 fathoms from one side to the other along the entire north coast, stretching from east to west and south. The harbour in front of it, on the land of the north, is a shallow beach with little value. We named it St. John's Island because we entered on the day of the decollation of this feat. Before reaching that harbour, there is an island about 5 leagues away from it, where there is no passage between the land and the island, but the said harbour dries up at every tide, and the water depth reaches only 2 fathoms. The best place to moor ships is towards the north of a small island in the middle of this harbour. We set sail from that harbour on the 1st day of September to head towards Canada. About 15 leagues from the said harbour, on Honest, there are 3 islands along the river, and between them flows a very deep and swift river, which is the river and route to the kingdom and land of Saguenay, as our 2 savages from Canada told us. This river is located between high stone mountains with little land in between, yet it has a great abundance of trees of various kinds that grow on these banks. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques Cartier was as bare as good land allows, enabling us to see enough trees for a ship of 30 tons, as green as one could hope to see. At the entrance to this river, we encountered 4 canoes from the natives. They approached with great fear and trepidation. One of our men selected one of their canoes, and another drew close, allowing them to hear one of our natives speaking, who introduced himself and made signs for them to come safely. The next day, the 2nd of that September, we left the river to make our way towards Canada. The current was strong and dangerous because there are 2 islands near the south side of this river, surrounded by water over 3 leagues deep with only a narrow strip of rocky shore at most places. The tide water flows strongly between these islands, making us fear losing our ship or needing our boat's aid to anchor safely on the highest land beyond, which is more than 30 fathoms deep. Beyond the Saguenay River and these islands, approximately 5 leagues south of Oniest, there is another island to the north. There are high lands around it where we could drop anchor to rest. We were unable to find the bottom at a depth of 20 fathoms near a bend in the land. So we were forced to return to this island, passing over it at a distance of 35 fathoms and finding good anchorage. The next morning we set sail and prepared to cross over. We encountered a type of fish never heard or seen by men. These fish are as large as martens without any fins, and their bodies and heads resemble those of a greyhound, as white as snow without a spot. There are numerous fish in this river between the sea and fresh water. The natives call them hothais, and we were told they are excellent to eat, with none found anywhere else along the entire river except here. On the 6th day of that month, with favourable wind, we sailed up the river for about 15 leagues, stopping at an island close to the northern mainland, forming a small bay with a sandy shore. This island is teeming with an incredible number of large turtles. Just as in this area, there is a great fishing ground for adhathes around that island. There is also a strong current near the island, similar to Bordeaux's, and ebb and flow. The island is about 3 leagues long and 2 wide, possessing fertile, fat level land with fine trees of various types. Among these are several oak trees heavily laden with acorns. Here is the translation of the text while preserving the name Jacques. They had grosser and better tasting meat than ours, but it was a bit harder. So they named this the beautiful island. On the 7th day of that month, after hearing Mass, we left the said island to go to the aforementioned river and reached 14 islands that were between 7 and 8 leagues from the beautiful island, which is the beginning of the land and province of Canada. Among them there was a large one about 10 leagues long and 5 broad, where people lived and engaged in significant fishing of all kinds of fish, depending on the season. We had anchored near that large island and the land to the north when we spotted 2 wild animals that we had caught on the previous journey. We encountered several people from the country who started to flee, and our 2 men began talking to them and introduced as Jackson and Domagaya. Upon learning their names, they became joyful and performed various ceremonies. They then spoke with our leaders about some of the main issues, and the latter brought us many eels and other fish, along with 2 or 3 loads of coarse meal, which is the bread they eat in that land, and several large melons. That day, several boats from the country arrived at our ships, loaded with peoplemen and women to see, and welcome our 2 men, who were all warmly received by our captain, who treated them to a feast and gave them some small, insignificant gifts as tokens of friendship, which satisfied them greatly. The next day, the Lord of Canada, known as Donnacona, arrived with 12 boats and several people in front of our ships. He then asked 10 to retreat and came aboard only with 2, accompanied by 16 men. He started his speech on board one of our 3 smallest ships, preaching and speaking in the manner, moving his body and gestures in a remarkable way, which is a ceremony of joy and reassurance. When he reached the main ship where Jacques and his companion were, the Lord spoke to them, and they spoke back, sharing what they had seen in France, and expressing their gratitude for the kind treatment they had received. Our captain then boarded the Lord's boat and ordered food and wine brought for him and his party, which was done, and they were very pleased. No other formalities were conducted at that time, waiting for a suitable place and moment. After these events, everyone dispersed, each going their separate way. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jack is taking leave. Jack's retired to Agahana in his boats to withdraw and head to his place. He had the captain prepare the boats for crossing, and advancing up the river with the current to search for a suitable haven or place to moor the ships. They sailed past the island about 10 leagues along its coastline, where they encountered a beautiful and pleasant spring. Along the shore of this area there was a small river with a shallow bar of 2 to 3 brasses deep that we found ideal for mooring our ships. We named this location Sainte-Croix, as it was the day we arrived. Nearby is a village inhabited by a people led by Donnacona, and there is a settlement known as Stadacone, which boasts excellent soil and is highly fertile, teeming with beautiful trees of various types, including oak, elm, willow, hazelnut, fir, cedar, vines, and hawthorn, producing fruit as large as damson plums. There are also wonderful hemp plants that grow without the need for seeds or farming. After visiting this place and finding it suitable, the captain and the others in the boats returned to the ships. As we left the river, we encountered one of the leaders from Stadacone, accompanied by several people, both men and women. He began a celebration in the local style, characterized by joy and confidence. The women danced and sang continuously while standing in the water up to their knees. Seeing their good cheer and willingness, Jacques drew closer in his boat and offered them knives and small glass beads. They were overjoyed and expressed their gratitude. Upon returning to the ships and sailing away from this group, Jacques went to see the island, marveling at its size and nature. He had the boats steered towards Sainte-Croix River, where they examined the impressive trees and the land's qualities. We discovered a vast area filled with beautiful trees, similar to those in our homeland. Additionally, we found numerous vineyards, something unseen throughout this region, and thus named the island Zaili di Bacchus, Island of Bacchus. The island stretches approximately 12 leagues in length and is a visually stunning landscape, despite being largely uncultivated, except for some small fishing huts. As mentioned previously, the following day we set sail with our ships to take them to that place of Holy Cross, and arrived there on the 14th of that month. Donnacona, Tagnogni, and Domagaya approached us with 25 boats loaded with people who had come from that very place where we had left. They headed to Stadacone, their usual dwelling place, but all came aboard our ships expressing joy, except for our 2 men, Te, Nogni, and Domagaya, who had changed their attitude and courage and refused to enter our ships despite several requests. The captain asked them if they intended to go, as promised with him, to Hochelaga, and they replied affirmatively, stating that they were ready to set off. Each then withdrew. The following day, the 15th, the captain went ashore with several men to plant beacons and markers for safer navigation. At this location, several people from the land approached us, including our 2 men and their group, who took position apart beneath a point of land on the bank of a river, without any approaching us, as the others had done. Once the captain was informed of their presence, he ordered some of his men to go with him, and they joined them under the said point. They met Donnacona, Tagnogni, Domagaya, and several others. After greetings, Tagnogni spoke first and told our captain that Donnacona was happy. This is why the captain and his men carried so many war clubs, as none of them had brought any from their side. The captain responded that they would not allow them to carry such weapons for their marriage ceremony, explaining that it was French custom, which they well understood. However, despite all their talk, the captain and Donnacona were not permitted to engage in a friendly interaction. We then realized that what Tagnogni said originated from him and his companion alone. Before departing, Donnacona and the captain exchanged a remarkable assurance. The entire community of Donnacona's people prostrated themselves, made three loud cries, an alarming sound to hear. They embraced each other so tightly, and we withdrew for that day. The following day, the 16th of the month, we sailed our two largest ships into the river, where there is open sea 3 fathoms deep and shallow water 1/2 fathom deep. The galleon was left behind to take them to Hochelaga. As soon as the ships were safely in the river, Donnacona, Tagnogni, Domagaya, and over 500 people, men, women, and children, boarded our vessels. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques in the place where they had feasted under the command of the said captain and others. No small gifts were given to them, and it was told to our captain by Tagnogni that the said lord was married and intended to go to Hochelaga, and that the said lord wanted only Jacques to accompany him, as the river offered nothing else. They were answered by the said captain that he would not leave, if it were possible for him, since he had received orders from his master, the king, to go as far ahead as he could. But if Tagnogni wished to go there as he had promised, they would provide him with a gift, which pleased and delighted him, and they only agreed to go back and forth to Hochelaga. To this, Tagnogni responded that he would not go. They then retired to their homes. The next day, the 17th of the said month, Donnacona and his companions returned as before, bringing many eels and other fish, which resulted in a great fish catch on the river, as will be mentioned later. When they arrived in front of the ships, they began to sing and dance, as was their custom. After they had finished, Donnacona made all his people gather on one side and formed a circle in the sand, placing our captain and his men inside. A harangue began, with Donnacona holding a young girl about 10 or 12 years old in one hand, presenting her to our captain. Immediately all the people of the said lord began making 3 cries and shouting signs of joy and alliance. He then presented 2 young boys, younger than the first, doing the same cries and ceremonies as before. Our captain thanked Donnacona for this gift. Tagnogni told the captain that the girl was the own daughter of the brother Donnacona, and one of the boys was his brother who spoke, and they were given him in good will and as a sign of alliance, not intending to go to Hochelaga. Our captain replied that if they had been given these children for that purpose, he would return them, but for no reason would he allow them to go, since he had received orders to the contrary. Domagaya, companion of Tagnogni, spoke to our captain, saying that the Lord had given him these children out of love and as a sign of trust, and he was content to go with him to Hochelaga. Tagnogni and Domagaya had much to say on this matter. It became clear to them that Tagnogni was thinking only of treachery and malice, given the other bad tricks they had seen him play. The captain then had the children placed in the ships, brought 2 swords, a large metal basin filled with water, and a lavatory, presenting these to Donnacona, who was very pleased and thanked our captain. Donnacona ordered his people to sing and dance, and asked the said Lord to pray for them. Here is the translated text with the name preserved as Jacques. Our Captain Jacques had a cannon fired, as those from the Teye, No, and Domagaya tribes had previously tested him, and he had never seen or heard such a thing. The captain responded that he would be happy to do it, and ordered 12 barges to be fired upon with their bullets, directly through the ship's side, which was adjacent to their ships and people. Everyone was so astonished that they thought the sky was falling on them, and they started shouting and screaming so loudly that it seemed like hell had been unleashed right there. Before they could retreat, Tai No made it known through intermediaries that the companions of the galley, which had been stuck the mooring, had killed 2 of their people with cannon fire. Everyone then retreated in a hurry, as if we had wanted to kill them. This was not true. No cannon was fired from the galley that day. The following day, they devised a clever plan to prevent us from going to Hochelaga. They dressed 3 men up as devils, pretending to have come from Kudriagni, their god, to stop us. The 3 devils had long horns like an arm's length, and were dressed in black and white dogskin. Their faces were painted completely black, and they placed them in one of their boats without our knowledge. The group approached our ships as they usually did, remaining inside the boat for about 2 hours while waiting for the right time and tide to reach Hochelaga. At that moment they all emerged from the boat and presented themselves before our ships without getting close, as if they usually did not. No then greeted Captain Jacques, who asked if he wanted the boat. The captain replied that not at the moment, but that he would soon enter our ships, and immediately the barge arrived with the 3 men inside, appearing to be 3 devils with large horns on their heads. One of them gave a remarkable speech as they passed by our ships without looking back at us. Then they went ashore and started banging and hitting the ground with their boat. Lord Donnacona and his people immediately seized the barge and the 3 men, who had lain down in the bottom of the boat like dead bodies. They took everything to a ship nearby, and not a single person remained before our ships as they all retreated into the ship. Inside they began preaching and teaching for about half an hour, which we heard from our ships. Then No and Domagaya approached us, joining their hands on their hats, walking towards us in a solemn manner, a great admiration, and began the saying of Tagnogni, pronouncing 3 times Jesus, 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 while lifting his eyes to heaven. Then Domagaya started saying Jesus Maria. Cartier looked up at the sky just as the other did. The captain, noticing their expressions and ceremonies, asked them what was happening and what had brought this back. They replied with pitiful news, saying, "Wes, it is good." The captain pressed for more details, and they answered that their god Kudragni had spoken to Hochelaga, and the 3 men before him was sent by him to announce the news that there was so much ice and snow that they would all die. Upon hearing this, we all started laughing and told them that their god Kudragni was just a fool, and that he didn't even know what he was saying, and they should tell it to his messengers, and that Jesus would keep them warm if they believed him. At this point, Tagnoni and his companion asked the captain if he had spoken to Jesus, and he answered that his priests had, and that the weather would be fine. They thanked the captain and went inside to tell the others the news, who immediately came out of the boat, making joyful noises, as instructed by the captain. To show their joy, they all started making the cries and shouts, which is their sign of happiness, and began dancing and singing, as was their custom. But upon consultation, Tegnogne and Dom Agaya told our captain that Lord Donnacona did not want anyone to go to Hochelaga with him unless he promised to leave someone behind on land with Donnacona. The captain responded that if they were willing to go with good courage, they could stay, and he would not let them face any trouble in doing so. So our captain and all the gentlemen, along with 50 sailors, set sail from the province of Canada aboard the galley and 2 barges to go to Hochelaga. And as for what we saw on that river, the next day, the 19th of September, we set sail again and made way with the galley and the 2 barges against the tide up the said river. We found beautiful and fertile land on both sides, more vivid than any plain water in the world, and so many vineyards laden with grapes along the river that it seemed they had been planted by human hands rather than grown naturally. However, since they are not cultivated or pruned, their grapes are not as large or as sweet as ours. We also found numerous houses on the river inhabited by people who engage in extensive fishing of all kinds of fish. These people approached our ships with such warmth and eagerness. If we had been from the country, bringing a great deal of fish and having in their hands what they could obtain from our trade during the day, making various signs of joy. And as we were settled about 25 leagues from Canada in a place called Ochele, which is a strait of that river, running very swiftly and perilously, with so many stones and other obstacles that several boats ran aground. Among others, a great lord of the country came who, upon his arrival, delivered a long sermon, making evident signs with his hands and other gestures that the aforementioned river was just a bit further ahead, extremely dangerous. He warned us to be on our guard, and this lord presented 2 of his children to the captain, from whom he chose a girl about 7 or 8 years old, and refused a boy of 2 or 3 years old because he was too small. The captain celebrated with the lord and his party as much as he could and gave them a few small presents. Then they left for shore. Since then, this lord and his wife have come to see their daughter all the way to Canada and brought a present for the captain. From September 19th to 28th of that month, we sailed up that river without losing any time a day, during which period we saw and discovered as beautiful a country and lands as one could desire. Level as it is with fine trees from all over the world, such as oaks, elms, walnuts, cedars, birch trees, aloes, sandbar willows, poplars, and many vines. There was an abundance of grapes, so much so that the companions filled their boats. The only animals we saw in great numbers were cranes, herons, storks, partridges, blackbirds, magpies, chaffins, woodpeckers, jays, solitary fowls, and other birds similar to those found in France, also in great abundance. On September 18th, we arrived at a large lake and wide expanse of that river, about 5 or 6 leagues across and 12 leagues long, and sailed upstream that day without encountering any depth greater than 2 fathoms, nor did we have to raise or lower our anchor. Upon reaching one of the ends of said lake, there was no visible passage or exit. It seemed to be entirely closed off, with no river flowing through, and we found only a depth of half a fathom at that point. We agreed to drop anchor here and search for a way through with the boats. We discovered 4 or 5 rivers all flowing from that river into this lake, coming from Hochelaga, but these rivers, as they exit from the aforementioned river, have bars and obstructions formed by the flow of water, at which point there is only 1 fathom of depth. These bars are about 4 or 5 fathoms long. This was during the lowest waters of the year, as we found out when the current carried us on the flood tide. They rise to over 3 fathoms during high water. All these rivers circle and surround 5 or 6 beautiful islands, which mark the end of said lake. Then, after covering about 15 leagues, the river widens. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques. On that very day we encountered one of them, where we found 5 men capturing wild beasts. They swiftly boarded our boats, as if they had never seen fear or hesitation their entire lives. As our boats reached land, one of those men took our captain in his arms and carried him to shore just as lightly as a 5-year-old child, for he was a tall and strong man. We discovered a large quantity of wild raz, a type of fish, which live in the river, and are as big as coneyas and delicious. They presented some to our captain, who gave them knives and paternosters in return. We asked them by sign if it was the path to Hochelaga, and they indicated yes, stating that there were still 3 days' journey ahead. How the captain prepared the boats to travel to Hochelaga and left the galley due to the difficulty of the passage, and how we arrived at Hochelaga and the warm welcome we received from the locals upon our arrival. The following day, seeing it was impossible to pass the galley at that time, the captain advised and readied the boats, storing provisions for as long as possible and loading them to their full capacity. He set sail with a group of noblemen, and Claude, the Grand Acanson butler of Monsieur the Dauphin, Charles de la Pomerguin, Jehan Pullet, along with 8 sailors, and including Mace Jalabert and Guillaume Le Breton, who had the responsibility under the captain of the other 2 ships to navigate up the river as far as possible. We sailed at a leisurely pace until 19th of October, when we arrived at Hochelaga, 45 leagues from where the galley had been stranded. Upon our arrival, numerous people from the land welcomed us with joy, bringing us fish and other provisions. They danced and celebrated our presence, and to win their friendship, the captain presented them with knives, paternosters, and other small gifts. Upon reaching Hochelaga, over 1,000 people, men, women, and children, came out to meet us, offering us an exceptional reception, as if they had never seen a child or a stranger before. And the men danced in one group, the women in another, and the children around them. After that, they brought us a large amount of fish and bread made from coarse millet, which we loaded into our boats. Our captain, observing this, went ashore with several of his companions. As soon as he arrived, everyone gathered around him, forming an invaluable platform. They presented their children to touch the captain and others, celebrating for over half an hour, seeing their generosity and warm welcome. The captain had all the women sit down and organized a feast for them. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques, small prayers of steel, and other small things, and part from the men of the swords. He then retired to the shore of the boats to have supper and spend the night, during which time that same people stayed on the riverbank closer to those boats, making several fine dances at all hours, shouting Agayes, which is the greeting of peace and joy. Page 23, how the captain and the noblemen, along with 25 well-armed men in good order, went to the city of Hochelaga and the location of that place. The next morning at dawn, the captain took position and had his men form up to go see the city. And staying with that people, they climbed a mountain that lies within their city with the captain, the nobleman. And 20 sailors, they went there while leaving some behind to guard the boats. They brought 3 men from the city of Hochelaga to guide them to that location. And as we traveled, we found it beaten up as much as possible, and more beautiful land, and better than one could imagine, all flat with beautiful chestnuts, just as lush those in the forests of France, under which all the land was covered in glittering gravel. And having walked about a league and a half, we encountered on the path one of the principal lords of that city, accompanied by several people. He signaled to us that we should rest at that location near a fire they had lit on the path, which is what we did. Then that lord began to deliver a sermon and teachings, as it is their custom to do in celebrating joy and making acquaintance, showing great kindness towards the captain and his company. The captain gave him a couple of axes, a couple of swords, and a cross for him to kiss, hanging it around his neck, and he thanked the captain. We continued our journey, and about half a league away we began to find tilled land and beautiful wide flat meadows from their grain fields, which is about 1,000 paces in breadth, as large or larger than peas, from which they live much like we do with flour. Among those meadows lies the city of Hochelaga, near and joined to a mountain that surrounds it, also tilled and very fertile, from which one could see far away. We named that mountain Mount Royal. The city is round and enclosed by 3 rows of logs in the shape of a pyramid, crossed at the top, with the row closest to the ground running perpendicular to it. Then another row of logs lying horizontally, well joined and sewn together according to their custom. It stands about 2 lances high, and there is only one door and entrance to that city, which is barred, on which, in several places along that enclosure, there are galleries and steps leading up, furnished with rocks and stones. For the guard and defense of that place, there are approximately 50. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques, but long houses of about 50 paces or more each, and 12 to 15 paces wide, all made of covered wood with large strips of bark and skins from these woods as broad as tables, skillfully sewn together according to their custom. Inside these houses are several rooms and chambers. At the top of these homes there is a large ground floor area where they make their fire, and they live in community, then retire to their individual chambers with their wives and children. They also have grain silos above their homes where they store their flour, which they call karakani. They prepare it as follows. They have wooden planks like grating, and they grind the flour into powder using these planks, then knead it into paste and make flat cakes that they place on a large hot stone. They cover them with hot stones and cook their bread in this way. They also make various porridges from this flour, as well as peas and beans, of which they have an abundance, along with large cucumbers and other fruits. They have large wooden containers in their homes for storing fish, which they dry over smoke during the summer and eat throughout the year. In doing so, they create impressive piles, as we have seen. All their food has no trace of salt. They sleep on bark blankets spread out on the ground, using rough hides from wild animals as bedding. The most precious thing they possess in this world is essigny, which is as white as snow. They collect it from the river using cornabots, a type of net, in a specific way. When someone dies or they capture enemies in battle and they cut them into large pieces through the buttocks, thighs, and shoulders. Then, at the location where Essergny is found, they lower the body into the water and leave it there for 10 to 12 hours before retrieving it. They discover the cornabots within these cuts and use them to create amulets, which they value as much as gold and silver. This people rely solely on farming and fishing for sustenance, as they do not seek or appreciate worldly goods. They are not nomadic like those from Canada or Saguenay, despite being subjects of 8 to 9 other nations along the same river. How we reached this city, the reception we received there, and the gifts given by their captain, as well as other events detailed in this chapter. Upon our arrival near this city, a large number of its inhabitants came before us, greeting us according to their customs. Here is the translation of the text. Preserving the name Jacques Welcomer, by following certain guides and conductors, we arrived at the best part of that city, where there was a wide open space between houses, about a square block in size, where several people gathered, some with children in their arms. They came to touch our faces, arms, and other parts of our bodies, rejoicing and happy to see us, treating us with the greatest kindness possible, gesturing for us to touch their children. After this, the men separated the women from the crowd and sat down around us on the ground, as if we were putting on a play. Then several women returned, each carrying a square mat like a tapestry, which they spread out on the ground in the middle of the place. They asked us to lie on that, and after 9 or 10 men brought in their king and lord of the land, whom they call Egahana, who was sitting on a large deer skin. They placed him in the middle of the square mats, next to our captain, signaling that he was their king and lord. This Egahana was approximately 50 years old, dressed more modestly than others, with a red sash like a lily adorning his head as a crown made from the fur of hedgehogs. He was completely covered in scars. After greeting the captain and his men and clearly showing that we were most welcome, he raised his arms and legs to the captain, asking to be touched. The captain rubbed his hands on Egahana's body. Then the king removed the sash and crown from his head and gave them to our captain. Immediately, several sick individuals, including blind, one-eyed, lame, impotent, and those with other severe disabilities, were brought to the captain. They sat and lay down next to him, asking to be touched, as if they could feel God's healing power working through him. Our captain, seeing their compassion and faith, recited the Gospel of St. John, praying for them, asking God to grant knowledge of our holy faith and grace to become Christian and receive baptism. Then the captain had all the men gather on one side, the women on another, and the children on a third. He gave the leaders of each group important instructions. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques. He was one of the knights, and they were women of prayers and other small needs then scattered across the square among the little children, exchanging tiny rings and steel agates, from which they derived a wonderful joy. This deed caused the said captain to order the trumpets and other musical instruments to sound at the news. The people rejoiced greatly. After these things we took our leave of them and withdrew, as the women stepped forward to stop us and offered us their provisions, which they had prepared for us, such as fish, soups, beans, and other foods to sustain and feed us in that place. since their provisions did not suit our taste and lacked any flavor. We thanked them, signaling that we did not wish to eat. After we left the town, several men and women came to guide us up a mountain nearby, which we called Royal Mountain, about a quarter league from that place. And as we stood on that mountain, we had a view and knowledge of more than 30 leagues around it. To the north, there is a range of mountains, east and west lying, and so many to the south. Among these mountains lies the most beautiful land one could see level and arable. From this best land, we saw the river beyond the place where our boats were anchored, at which point there is a leap of water, the most fierce and powerful we have ever seen. It was not possible for us to pass until we could look with great width and space, running south, and it passes near 3 beautiful round mountains that we see, and we estimate they are about 15 leagues from us. We were told by signs from our 3 guides from this land that there are 3 such waterfalls in the river, like the one where our boats were, but we could not understand the distance between them due to language barriers. They also showed us with signs that these falls can be navigated for more than 3 leagues up the river. Beyond, they indicated that along these mountains to the north there is a large river flowing from the west, similar to the one we saw. We believe this is the river passing through the kingdom of Saguenay, and without our asking or signaling, they took the captain's whistle chain, which was silver, and the hilt of his dagger, made of brass like gold. It was hanging on the side of one of our sailor companions. They showed us that it came from that river, and there are Agawinda, meaning bad people who are armed to their fingertips. They demonstrated their armor, which is made of ropes and boyoks, frayed and woven together. This gave us an idea that these Agawindas constantly wage war against each other, but due to the language barrier, we could not fully understand how many there were. There were people as far as the aforementioned country. Our captain showed them a red copper, which they call Cagnadays, and guided them to that place, asking through signs it came from there. They started assisting with the head, say no. They demonstrated that it came from Saguenay, which is in the opposite direction of what had been mentioned. After witnessing these things, we withdrew to our boats, which was not without difficulty for many members of that people. Some of them, upon seeing our tired men, loaded them onto their backs like horses and carried them, and we arrived at our boats and prepared to return to our galley, doubting if there were any stowaways on board. This did not go without great regret for that people. As long as they could follow us downstream along that river, they did so, and we finally reached our galley on Monday, the 4th day of October. On Tuesday, the 5th day of the month, we set sail and prepared our galley and boats, returned to the province of Canada at the port of Sainte-Croix, where our ships were moored. On the 7th day, we arrived at a river that flows towards the north. Emerging from that river at its entrance are 4 small, flat islands covered in trees. We named this river Rivière de Fouez, as one of these islands extends into the river and is visible from a distance. The captain had a large cross planted on its tip and ordered the boats prepared to go with the tide to explore it. This was done, and they swam around that day along the river. Since it was found to be of no significant value, they returned and set sail downstream. As for our arrival at the port of Sainte-Croix, the order in which we found our ships, and how the lord of that land came to meet our captain, and his visit to the captain, and some details about their customs. On Monday, the 11th day of October, we arrived at the port of Sainte-Croix, where our ships were moored. We discovered that the masters and sailors who had stayed behind had built a fort in front of the ships using large pieces of wood, standing upright and joined together. It was completely surrounded by artillery and well ordered for defense against any power from that land. As soon as the lord of that land heard of our arrival, he came the next day, the 12th, accompanied by Taignoagny, Domagaya, and several others. They threw a magnificent feast for our captain, feigning great joy at our coming. The captain reciprocated well every time they had not served him properly. Donnacona asked our captain to go the next day to see Canada, which he promised to do. So on the following day, the 13th of that month, our captain, along with his gentlemen and 50 companions, went to meet Donnacona and his people, who lived about a league from where the ships were moored. Their settlement is called Stadacona. Upon our arrival at this place, the inhabitants came out to meet us from their homes, a distance of about half a league. And there they gathered, sitting in their customary manner, with men on one side and women on the other, continually singing and dancing. After exchanging greetings and showing mutual respect, the captain gave the men some knives and other trinkets of little value, and had all the women and girls pass before him, giving each one a steel ring, which they acknowledged gratefully. This captain was then led by Donnacona and Taignoagny to see their homes, which were well stocked with provisions for their sustenance during the winter, and we were shown skin shields of human heads, stretched on wooden frames like parchment rolls. Donnacona informed us that these were the Tradamans from the north, who constantly waged war against them. 2 years ago, it was said, the Tradamans had attacked them within the river at an island in the Saguenay, while they were crossing to Hongido to wage war on them, with approximately 200 people, men, women, and children. They had been caught sleeping in a fort they had built, and the Trudmans set it on fire all around, killing them all except for 5 who escaped. The survivors still spoke of their outrage, vowing vengeance. After these events, we returned to our ships. This is the way of life for the people of this land and their beliefs and customs. They have no belief in God. Instead, they worship a being they call Kudragni, whom they say speaks to them frequently and tells them about the weather. They believe that when it thunders, Kudragni throws things from the sky into their eyes. They also believe that upon dying, they go among the stars, then descend to the horizon like those stars. They traveled to beautiful meadows filled with magnificent trees, flowers, and fruits. After hearing all this, we corrected their misunderstanding and told them that Kudragni is a bad spirit who deceives them, claiming he is the only God who resides in heaven and gives them everything they need, being the creator of all things. We urged them to believe only in him and to be baptized, or else they would go to hell. We spoke to them at length about our faith. They easily believed what we said and even asked our captain to baptize them. The Lord Taignoagny and Domagaya and people from their town came to him for this purpose, but as we did not know their true intentions and they lacked courage, and there being no one to teach them the faith at that time, nothing came of it. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques offered an excuse to them. He told Taignoagny and Domagaya that they should let him know he would return on another journey, bringing priests and holy oil. As an excuse, he said one could not baptize without this holy oil, something he believed because several children had been baptized in Brittany. The promise of a return visit made them very joyful. This people live in community, possessing goods much like the Brazilians, dressed in skins of wild beasts, and quite poor. In winter, they are shod with shoes, but in summer go barefoot. They keep the marriage order, except that some take 2 or 3 wives. Once their husband dies, they never remarry, enduring the death all their lives and marking their faces with a charcoal blackened appearance, and their skin like the thickness of the blade of a knife. This is how one knows them to be widows. They have another custom for their daughters that is very bad. From the age when they can go to men, or are placed in a brothel house, abandoned to everyone who desires them, until they find a suitor. We have seen these houses filled with such girls, like a school of boys in France. Moreover, fate, according to their custom, keeps these houses where they gamble away everything they own, even their bed sheets. They do not engage in heavy work. They plough their land with small hoes, about the size of a half sword, or they cultivate their fields, which they call osisi. This is as hard as pepper, and of the same kind found throughout Brazil. Similarly, they have a large quantity of large melons, cucumbers, squash, peas, beans, and all colors, not like ours. They also have a herb that they use extensively in summer to endure winter. They dry it in the sun and carry it around their necks in a small leather pouch, along with a stone or hoe pouch. At any time they make powder from this herb and put it into one of the pouches, then place a piece of hot coal on top and inhale through one end, while exhaling through the other, filling their bodies with smoke so strongly that it comes out of their mouths and noses like a pipe. They never leave without these things. We have tried this smoke, and after putting it in our mouths, it feels as if we had put powder of some poor person's ashes into it. How hot it is! The women of this land work harder than the men, both in fishing, where they make a great deal, and in labor and other tasks. They are so tough, men, women, and children alike, that they can withstand the cold better than beasts. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques of the coldest extremity we have ever seen, which was wonderful and harsh, coming over the ice and snow to our ships every day, most of them completely naked, a sight hard to believe. They catch a great number of wild animals such as otters, deer, elk, hares, martens, minks, and others during these ice and snow periods. They eat their flesh roasted on the fire after removing the fur, and do the same with their fish. From what we have seen and heard of this people, it seems to me that they could be easily tamed. May God, in his holy mercy, look upon them favorably. Amen. Regarding the grandeur and depth of this river and the animals, birds, fish, and other things we witnessed, as well as the geographical layout. The river begins past Assumption Island, flowing through the high mountains of Honguido and the 7 Islands. The distance across is approximately 35 to 40 leagues, with over 200 brasses a unit of depth that are safe for navigation, primarily on the side facing the south and north, namely in the 7 Islands, where there are 2 large rivers flowing down from Saguenay Mountains, which create several dangerous ships at sea. At the entrance of these rivers we have seen many flotillas and seahorses. Upon crossing the 7 Islands there is a small river that stretches 3 or 4 leagues inland over marshes, teeming with freshwater birds. From the beginning of this river to Hochelaga which is more than 300 miles long. It originates from the river coming down from Saguenay. This river, situated high in the mountains, becomes even deeper and narrower as it approaches the province of Canada on the northern shore. It is a very dangerous river to navigate. After this river, we reach the province of Canada, where there are several villages with populations. There are also numerous islands in the river, both large and small, one of which stretches over 10 miles long, featuring beautiful tall trees and high cliffs. This island also has many vineyards. There is a pass on each side of it. The best and safest route is on the southern side, where there is a vast stretch of good farmland at a suitable height. Here lies the town and settlement of Donnacona, where 2 of our men were captured during the first voyage. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques. The place is named Stadacon, and before arriving at this location, there are 4 settlements, namely Arrest, Stanatotela, which is situated on a mountain, and Saitadon. Then comes the aforementioned place, Stadacon, where, on high ground facing the northeast, flows a river called the River of Sainte-Croix, where we have been since the 15th day of September until the 6th day of May. At this site, ships are dryland bound, as mentioned earlier, when passing by this place, and the settlements of Ticonderoga, which is also on a mountain, and the town of Hochelaga. Hochelaga is a vast expanse of land. All the land on both sides of said river up to Hochelaga and beyond is equally beautiful and fertile soil as no one has ever seen before. There are no mountains far from the river that can be seen across these lands. Several rivers flow down from these mountains into the aforementioned river. This entire territory is covered with plains filled with various types of wildflowers and an abundance of vines, except around the settlements, which have been abandoned to make room for habitation and farming. There is a great number of deer, squirrels, beavers, and other wildlife. There are also many fish, such as pike, muskie, martens, otters, mink, badgers, weasels, beavers, rats, some which are incredibly large, and various kinds of wild fowl like herons, swans, owls, finches, blackbirds, thrushes, woodpeckers, chaffinches, robins, larks, and others similar to those found in France. As mentioned earlier in these accounts, the river is the most abundant source of fish, with all kinds that one has ever heard or seen from the beginning to the end. You will find almost every species and type of sea and freshwater fish imaginable, including many baleen whales, seals, walruses, and a creature called an adhuthri, which is a type of fish we have never seen or heard of before. They are as large as seals, white like snow, and resemble ferret-like animals. They live between the sea and fresh water, starting from the Saguenay River to Canada. Some teachings shared by those in the land since our return from Hochelaga. Upon returning from Hochelaga with the galleon boats, we engaged in frequent interactions with the nearby people around our ships in a pleasant and friendly manner, except for some minor disagreements with a few mischievous individuals, who others found very annoying. We were told by Donnacona and others that the river before it is named the Saguenay River, which flows to the Saguenay, located further away from the beginning, more than a league down, the path towards Honest, Noronest, and takes 8 or 9 days to traverse. Beyond this point, it becomes no deeper than waist high. However, the direct and good path of the Saguenay is along the river. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jacques Opto to Hochelaga. There is a river flowing from the Saguenay, and between this river and the lake about a league's distance, we are told that the people are dressed and equipped like ourselves, and that there are many towns and villages, good people, and great quantities of gold and red copper. The whole land, since the first river to Hochelaga and the Saguenay, is an island surrounded by this river and its tributaries. Beyond the Saguenay, the river divides into 2 or 3 large branches before reaching a gentle sea, which they say has never been seen from the shore, according to those from the Saguenay. They have told us that we were not beyond their limit when we left our galley at Hochelaga. Instead, there is a river flowing towards the south, about a day's journey up this river, where there is no ice or snow, but constant wars among the people of that land. They say there are oranges, almonds, nuts, apples, other fruits in great abundance on that land. We asked them if there was any gold or copper. They replied that there was not. In their opinion, this place is near Florida, as they indicate through their signs and movements. Due to a severe illness among the people of Stadacona, which we had frequently visited, we were affected and many of our men died, up to 25 in number. In December, we learned that the mortality had begun among the people of Stadacona, and by their confession, more than 50 had already died. For this reason, we defended our fort and did not allow them near us. Despite our efforts, the disease broke out around us in a most extraordinary way. People lost substance, their legs became swollen and sore, their nerves were withdrawn and blackened like coal, and in some cases all their body was covered with purplish drops of blood. The illness spread to the hips, thighs, shoulders, arms, and chest. Furthermore, the mouth became so infected and putrid due to sorghum, presumably a type of infection or parasite, that the flesh deteriorated down to the roots of their teeth, which also fell out. The severity of this disease on our 3 ships was such that in February, out of 110 men we had, only 10 remained healthy. No one could help another, and it was pitiable to see, given the circumstances. The people from the land came daily in front of our fort, which very few of us ever left, and there were 8 dead and more than 50 whom one no longer expected to see alive. Our captain, moved by the compassion and illness thus displayed, ordered everyone to pray and make offerings, and had an image placed in remembrance of the Virgin Mary against a tree far from our fort, protected from snow and ice by a bow's length. He instructed that on Sunday, following Mass at that spot, everyone should participate in a procession singing the 7 Psalms of David with the litanies, praying to the aforementioned Virgin to have mercy on her beloved child and show us pity. The stated Mass was celebrated before the image, after which our captain, Jacques, made a pilgrimage to Our Lady of Roquemado, promising to visit her if God granted him safe return to France. On that day, Philip Rogemont, native of Amboise, about 22 years old, died. Given the unfamiliar nature of the illness, the captain opened the body to see if he could identify the cause and perhaps preserve knowledge of it as best as possible. He found that the heart was white and flabby, surrounded by over a pot of reddish water, as if rubbed against a rough stone. The liver was beautiful, but the lungs were entirely blackened and deadened, with all blood withdrawn above the heart. When opened, a great abundance of black, infected blood gushed forth above the heart. Similarly, there was a slight damage on the spine, about 24 places, as if it had been rubbed against a rough stone. After this, he cut open and incised a thigh, which was very dark outside, but inside the flesh was found to be quite beautiful. He was buried with all possible honour. May God by his holy grace forgive his soul and all his transgressions. Amen. Since that day, the illness has continued unabated, so much so that at any given moment there were not 3 healthy men among the 3 ships, not even one who could go below deck to draw water for himself or his companion. Indeed, there were already several dead. We had no choice but to bury them under the snow due to our weakness and lack of strength. It was not possible for us then to open the earth, which was frozen as we were so weak, and we had little power. Moreover, we feared a great fear from the locals that they might realize our pity and weakness. To cover up this illness when they approached our fort, Captain Jacques, whom God has always preserved, would step out in front of them with 2 or 3 men, both healthy and sick. He would then lead them away, and when he saw them outside the fort, he would feign wanting to attack them by shouting and throwing sticks after them, signaling to these wild beasts that all his men within the ships were praying. Here is the translated text, with the name preserved as requested. The men were assigned to galling ironwork, others to making bread and other tasks, and it was not advisable for them to go outside. They believed, and had the captain make a noise, carrying sick people from the ships into the icy waters using sticks and stones in an effort to cure them. At that time, we were so afflicted by this illness that we almost lost hope of ever returning to France if God, through his infinite goodness and mercy, had not looked upon us with pity and granted us knowledge of a cure for all illnesses, the most excellent ever seen or discovered on earth, as will be mentioned in this chapter. For an indefinite period we had been trapped on the Holy Cross and in the ice and snow, and numerous people had died since the onset of the illness up to March. From November until the 15th day of April, we were continuously enclosed within the 2 and half-foot thick ice, which lasted until that time. On top of the land there was 4 feet of snow, so high it exceeded the sides of our ships. Our drinking water had all frozen in the barrels, and inside our ships from bottom to top there was a 4-inch thick layer of ice against the sides. The entire river was frozen, with the sweet water within reaching up to Hochelaga. During this time, 25 of our best and most valued companions passed away, and there were over 50 others whose lives we hoped to save, but none was entirely exempt from illness except for 3 or 4. However, by his holy grace, God looked upon us with mercy and sent us knowledge and a cure for our healing and restoration in the manner described in this chapter. One day, seeing how severe the illness had become and how distressed his men were, the captain went outside the fort and walked on the ice. He spotted a group of people from Stadacona approaching, including Domagaya, whom the captain had seen 10 or 12 days earlier suffering from the same illness as his companions. His leg was so swollen at the knee that it resembled a 2-year-old child. All his nerves were damaged, his teeth were lost and decayed, and his gums were rotten and infected. The captain, upon seeing Domagaya healthy and recovered, was filled with joy, hoping to learn from him how he had been cured. He intended to provide orders and assistance to his men. When they reached the fort, the captain asked Domagaya how he had recovered from his illness. Domagaya replied that he had consumed the juice. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Mark the leaves of a jackis, a tree from which he had taken care, and it was the singular remedy for illness. The captain asked him if there was none around, and he demonstrated how to use it to cure his servant, who had contracted this disease in Canada while living with Donnacona, page 38 refusing to reveal the number of companions who were also ill. Domagaya then sent 2 women to inquire about it. They brought back 9 or 10 baskets full of leaves and bark from the tree, showing how to peel and boil them in water and drink the resulting brew for 2 days. They would also paste to supply the paysan and afflicted legs, and this tree was believed to cure any illness. They call this tree amida in their language. Soon after, the captain prepared a drink for the sick, but none of them wanted to try it, except 1 or 2 who took a chance. As soon as they drank it, they experienced an extraordinary miracle. All the ailments they had been suffering from were cured after drinking it 2 or 3 times. Some of these companions had had smallpox for 5 or 6 years when this medicine cured them effortlessly. After witnessing and understanding its power, there was such a rush to get hold of the remedy that people even fought over who would be first to use it. A tree as large and old as an oak in France was used within 6 days. It accomplished more in that time than all the doctors from Louvain and Montpellier combined with all their medicines from Alexandria could have done in a year. It was so beneficial that everyone who used it recovered health and healing, thanks to God. Meanwhile, Donnacona, accompanied by Taignoagny and several other lazy hunters, left for 2 months without returning. Upon their return, they brought back a large number of people which we were not accustomed to seeing. During the time when illness and mortality reigned among our ships, Donnacona, Taignoagny, and many others set out to hunt deer and elk. They called these animals Ianista and Esquinodo in their language because the snow had melted and ice was breaking up in the river, allowing them to navigate on it. Domagaya and others told us that they would be back in about 15 days, but they stayed away for 2 months. This made me suspect that they were gathering a large number of people to cause us trouble because we looked so weak, despite the excellent order we had maintained. If the entire power of their land had been there, they could have done it. Other things we were looking at. And while they were outside, many people came to our ships every day, as was their custom, bringing us fresh meat from deer and elk, various kinds of fish, which they sold us at a high price or else tried to take away with them because they had urgent need for provisions due to the long winter. Donnacona returned to Stadacone with a large number of people, and Donnacona, afraid to meet the captain, sent someone in his place, thinking the captain was heading towards him. On the 21st day of April, Domagaya arrived at the shore accompanied by several handsome and powerful men. We were not used to seeing them. It was said that Lord Donnacona would welcome them the next day and bring a lot of deer, meat, and other game. The next day, on the 22nd, Donnacona arrived, bringing with him a large number of people from Stadacone. We did not know the reason or purpose, but a proverb says that no one can escape everything. This was our situation because we were so weakened by illness and loss of men that we had to leave one of our ships at this place called Sainte-Croix. When the captain learned of their arrival and they had brought so many people, and Dom Agar told him about it, he made them cross the river instead of going directly to Stadacone, which was unusual. This gave us suspicion of a betrayal. Seeing this, the captain sent his servant accompanied by Jean Paulet, both of whom were very dear to that people from the country, to see what was happening at the location and what they were doing. The servant and Paulet pretended to go and see Donnacona, as they had spent a lot of time with him in their city, and wanted to bring him small gifts. When Donnacona learned of their arrival, he became sick and lay down. They then went to the house of Taignoagny to see him, but found the houses so full of people that it was hard to move around. This was not something we were used to seeing, and Taignoagny did not allow the servant to go to other houses. Instead, he accompanied them partway to the ships and told them that if the captain wanted to take a lord from the country named Aguana, who had caused him displeasure, and bring him to France, he would be obliged to do so. He assured them that the captain could ask for whatever he wanted, and the servant was to return the next day with the answer. When the captain learned of the large number of people at the location, he did not know their purpose, but suspected a cunning scheme on their part. He decided to take Lord Taignoagny, Domagaya, and some of the principals. He was free to bring the lord to France to report to the king what he had seen. Translation: Jacques, an accidental traveller, describes wonders of the world. He attested to having been in the land of Saguenay, where there is infinite gold, rubies, and other riches. And there are white men, much like those in France, dressed in fine linen clothes. He claims not to have seen any other country where people do not eat or have a permanent settlement, but merely live by drawing water with a stick. He has also been in countries of the Piscemians and others where people have only one leg. And there are many more wonders to tell. The said Lord is an old man who never ceased to travel to distant lands by rivers, streams, and on foot since his youth. After Jacques and his servant delivered their message and informed the captain of what Taignoagny commanded, he sent the captain back the next event with his servant to visit Taignoagny and tell him what he wished, promising fair treatment and some of his desires. Taignoagny commanded him to come the following day, bringing Donnacona, Lord, and those who had caused him displeasure. He did not comply. Thus 2 days passed without their arrival, during which time no one came to the ships as was customary. Instead, they fled as if we wanted to kill them. We realized their weakness, and because they were warned that Cicadine's people were surrounding us, and having abandoned the lower part of the ship to catch the old wind, they arrived from Stadacon on the 3rd day, crossing most of them easily in small boats. But Donnacona refused to pass. Taignoagny and Domagaya spent over an hour negotiating before agreeing to cross. Finally, they crossed and came to speak with the captain, asking Taignoagny to take and bring this man to France. The captain refused, stating that his king had forbidden him from taking any men or women to France. However, he could take a few young children to learn the language, but only if they came willingly. He promised to take them to new land and place them on an island. These words were said by the captain to reassure them for the purpose of bringing Lord Donnacona, who remained near the water. After these words, greatly pleased Taignoagny, hoping never to return to France, and he promised the captain that he would return the next day, which was Sainte-Croix Day, to bring Lord Donnacona and all the people from this place. How on Sainte-Croix Day the captain had a cross planted within our fort, and how Lord Donnacona, Taignoagny, Domagaya, and their party arrived, and of his capture. On May 3rd, On the occasion of the saint's day, the captain had a beautiful cross erected about 35 feet high, under the crossbar of which there was an embroidered shield with the arms from France. And on that same day, about noon, several people from Stadacone, men, women, and children, told us that their Lord Donnacona, Taignoagny, Dongni, Domagaya, and others who were with him were coming. We were overjoyed at this news and hoped to capture them. They arrived about 2 hours later. When they reached our ships, our captain went to greet Lord Donnacona, who reciprocated the gesture, but kept a watchful eye on us, filled with suspicion. Soon after, Taignoagny arrived and informed Lord Donnacona that he would not enter the fort. At that moment, one of their men brought fire from outside the fort and lit it at the Lord's command. Our captain asked Taignoagny to come aboard and dine with us as was customary. Taignoagny agreed, saying he would enter soon. They did so and entered the fort. However, beforehand, our captain been warned by Domagaya that Taignoagny had spoken ill of him and told Lord Donnacona not to board the ships. Seeing this, our captain left the enclosure and noticed that the women were fleeing at Taignoagny's warning, while only men remained. He then commanded his men to capture Lord Donnacona, Taignoagny, Domagaya, and 2 other prominent figures he pointed out, after which the others were withdrawn. Shortly afterward, Lord Donnacona entered the fort with our captain, but Taignoagny appeared intent on removing him. Seeing no other order, our captain shouted that they must hold them. The men of our captain responded by capturing Lord Donnacona and those who had been freed. Here is the translation of the text preserving the name Jacques. He then told the captain that he was in good spirits, and that after speaking to the King of France and recounting what he had seen in Saguenay and other places, he would return within 10 or 12 months. The king, it was said, would give him a great gift. This pleased Jacques greatly, and he shared this with the others, who expressed their joy with 3 mighty cries. At that moment, the people and Jacques engaged in several sermons and warnings which could not be fully understood due to language barriers. Our captain told Jacques that they were certainly seeing things across the river for easier communication, and he assured him of what Jacques had said. Then bark from the leaders arrived at these ships. They began by making various warnings praising the captain. They presented him with 24 collars of Esserne, which is considered the greatest wealth in their world, more valuable than gold or silver. After sufficient discussion and planning, as there was no remedy for the Lord's escape, it became clear he would have to go back to France. He ordered food to be brought for them to eat at sea. Jacques gave Jacques 2 pounds of tin and 8 hatchets, along with other small items like knives and rosaries. This made him very happy. The next day, on the 5th of May, a large number of the people returned to speak to their Lord, and 24 women came from river across the rock they call Casney, carrying provisions, coarse, corn, the grain they live on, meat, fish, and other supplies, all prepared according to their custom. When these arrived at the ships, the captain welcomed them warmly and asked Jacques for permission to take these women back, promising that within 12 months he would return with Jacques to Canada. He did this to please them. Each of these women gave a collar of Esserne to the captain. Then they returned to the other side of the river where the people of Stadacona were bidding their lord farewell. On Saturday, the 6th of May, we set sail from Stay. Croix harbour and arrived at the Isle Oxcodras, where we stayed until the 16th of that month, letting the waters, they were too strong and dangerous to navigate. Here is the translation of the text, preserving the name Jack's River and waiting for good weather. During this time, several boats arrived from the subjects of Donnacona, who came from the river Saguenay. When Domagea warned them about the capture of these people and the way they were brought to France, they were greatly astonished, but did not approach the ships to speak to Donnacona. He told them that he would return in 12 months, and that he had been treated well by the captain and his companions, for which they thanked the captain and gave Donnacona 3 packs of beaver pelts and sea wolves, along with a large red copper knife from Saguenay, and other items. They also presented the captain with a Discerni collar, for which he received 10 or 12 hatchets, which made them very happy and grateful. The next day, the 16th of May, we set sail from this island in the fog and arrived at another island about 15 leagues away, which is roughly 5 leagues long. We passed by it that day to cross over during the night, hoping to pass the dangers of Saguenay the following day, which are great. In the evening we reached this island where we found a large number of hares, from which I obtained a substantial quantity, and so we named the island Hare Island. That night the wind turned contrary and caused a storm, forcing us to return to the island in the fog from which we had set out, as there was no other passage between the islands. We stayed there until May 21st, when the wind changed for the better, and we continued our journey day and night. The following day we set out to search for Bryan Island, which we did not want to do due to the shortened route. The 2 lands lying southeast and northwest are a quarter of the way between east and west. There are approximately 50 leagues between them. This island is located at 47 degrees north latitude. On Thursday, the 26th day of May, on the feast day of our Lord's Ascension, we crossed over to a land and sandy beach with fine sand about 8 leagues from Bryan Island. Beyond this, there are large plains with tree-enclosed seas, for which we saw no entrance or opening. On Friday, the 27th, as the wind changed at the coast, we returned to Bryan Island, staying there until the 1st day of June. We then set out to explore a tall land rising to the southeast of the island, which appeared to be an island itself. We sailed around it for about 2.5 leagues, during which I observed 3 tall islands near the sandy beaches. Returned to the tip of the aforementioned land, which forms 2 or 3 high caps of wonder and has a deep sea and so rapid a tide that it is impossible to go further. Page 46, we arrived at the Cap of Lorraine on that day, located at approximately 46 degrees and a half south, from which there is a low shore and an entrance to a river. However, there is barely any depth. Traversing these shores towards the south, we saw another cape of land that we named Cape St. Paul, situated at about 47 degrees and 1/4. On Sunday, the 4th day of said month, the Feast of Pentecost, we made out the coastline of the southwest of New Land, approximately 22 leagues from the Cape. Due to the contrary wind, we sailed along a shore called St. Spirit's Beach until Tuesday, when we set sail from it and followed the coast up to the islands of St. Pierre, where we encountered several dangerous isles and low shores stretching along the route southwest and northwest at 1.23 leagues from the sea. We visited these islands of St. Pierre, where we found several ships, both from France and Brittany, from St. Barnabas's Day in June until the 16th day of said month, when we set sail from them and arrived at Cape Raises, entering a bay called Roge Nose, where we took on water and supplies to cross the sea. We left one of our boats there and set sail from the aforementioned bay on Monday, the 19th day of said July, and with favourable weather we sailed across the sea until on July 6, 1536, we reached St. Malo harbour, thanks be to the Creator. Having concluded our navigation, we pray for his grace and eternal bliss. Amen. Following is the language of the countries and kingdoms of Hochelaga and Canada, otherwise known as New France. First, the numbering system 1, Segda Tigny 3, Ashi 4, Hanukkah 5, Awiskan 6, Indahir 7, Ayagat 8, Adig 9, Madeline 10. Of turtles they speak of their pain. They call the boy Kai Konda, leaves of boys, Hoga they call their God Kudragni. Give me to drink Kwazaho, Thada page 48, give me breakfast Kwazaho Kwaskaho, give me dinner Kwazaho Kwatsrim. Let's go to sleep, Kazigno Anadaho, good day Egnaz, let's play Kazigno Kari, come talk to me, Azani Kwadedia, look at me, Kwagatama, be quiet, Easter. Let's go to the boat Kufegno Kasnui, give me a knife Kwazaho Agohida, a hatchet Adon, a harrow Ahina, an arrow Quahatum. Let's go hunting, Quafigno Donacent, a deer Ionesta. From others they say they are sheep and call them Asquanondo, a rabbit Sawhamda, a Dogagayo, strange noises Sadigwenda, the path ad. They call cucumber or melon seeds Casconda. When they want to say tomorrow, they say Acade, the sky Kenihia, the earth Damgar, the sun Yizne, the moon Asomaha, stars Sigihoham, the wind Koaha, the sea Agogasi, waves of the sea Koda, an island Kohina, a mountain Ogacha, ice Haneska, snow Kanisa, cold Athau, Cholt Odazan, fire Azista, smoke Kyukia, a house Kanoka. They call their meeting Sehi, they call city Canada. Notes and corrections. As stated in the introduction to this volume, the 1545 original edition from which this translation is taken is far from representing an unblemished text typographically. It also has inaccuracies when compared to extant manuscripts of Cartier's account. The modern editor has resolved to address these issues by adding an appendix to the current reprint that corrects errors and highlights variants in the manuscripts. In some cases, these variants are significant enough to be considered substantial additions, providing chapters entirely missing from the 1545 edition and its subsequent versions by Remusio and Hackley. There are 3 manuscripts, all written contemporaneously with the original composition, closely resembling each other, that at first glance could appear to be from the same hand. However, there are differences suggesting that these are drafts created from a single detailed manuscript with minor additions for better organization. The manuscript, we believe, possesses characteristics of priority over the others, is numbered 560-53 in the current cataloguing of French manuscripts in the Imperial Library, originally designated. Here is the translation of the text into English, preserving the name Jacques. This work is numbered Mensaye. It subsequently received catalogue number 6 at Eleven at the Royal Library of Fontainebleau and was later assigned number 10772 at the Paris Library. It is bound in an old, newly restored leather cover, light brown with gold decorations featuring the royal arms and the King's Cipher Charles X on both covers. We will henceforth specifically refer to this volume as letter for brevity. The second manuscript, Currumbird 5589, was originally numbered 833. It was classified at Fontainebleau under number 672 and later in Paris as number 125. It is bound in an old red morocco full binding with gold filigrees, an oval medallion featuring the royal arms on both covers. We will refer to this as letter B, the third catalogued as number 56044 in its current order, originated from the library of Philibert de la Mer. It carried classification number 373 within that collection and was later inscribed in the King's Manuscript Catalogue, Amber Tendron Tune 6053. It is bound in a modern half leather binding with red levant leather on the spine and marbled Anne paper on both covers. We will refer to this as letter. All three manuscripts are written on similar paper with a crown in folio format. The volumes differ in size only due to the trim. The first has 59 filled pages, the second has 66, and the last has 62. The first manuscript lacks any chapter titles found in the other two or in the printed version, nor does it include the epistle to the king present in the others. It begins with a general title on a beautiful page, which is mirrored in manuscript EB on the verso of the first leaf upon which nothing else is written. This general title is missing from manuscript C, but we can assume that it was originally included, as in manuscript B, on the verso of a guard leaf that may have been lost or simply overlooked during edition. This title differs significantly from the printed edition's title, which was evidently supplied by the publisher if the manuscript lacked it, or substituted by them for the original title, which they may have deemed too heavily formal to pique public curiosity. Here is the title as provided our manuscript's second voyage made under the command and desire of the most Christian King Francis I, in order to complete the discovery of western lands lying beneath the climate and parallels of the lands and kingdom of said Lord, having been previously begun by him. This voyage was made by Cartier, native of St. Malo in Brittany, pilot to said Lord in the year 1536. We are inclined to believe that manuscript is none other than the original dispatch intended for the king, either because Cartier himself was allowed to present it, or, as suggested by Lescarbot, it passed through the hands of Admiral de Brian. The epistle, at the head of the other copies and forming part of them, it naturally should, in an official presentation or dispatch, have been set apart for the sovereign's inspection, and thus it is not attached to the narrative which it undoubtedly accompanied, but from which it was materially detached. It was only in later transcriptions that the epistle was reunited with the narrative, and the chapters of this provided with titles which were not originally thought of. With these additions, manuscript B faithfully reproduces manuscript A, and manuscript C is almost entirely conformed to them. In cases where some difference may be observed, manuscript C appears to reflect more particularly the text followed by the editor of 1545, as well as that used by Lescarbot. As for the editions by Turnox and the Literary and Historical Society of Quebec, one was done from manuscripts B and C, while the other was based on all three manuscripts combined with extracts from Lescarbot. Since the reading of the manuscripts may offer some uncertainty, particularly for proper names, we found it useful to compare the various readings adopted by successive editors, and therefore, for the eventual designation of these publications, we have assigned the letter L to Lescarbot's extracts, the letter T to Turnox's edition, and the letter Q to the Society of Quebec's edition. We deemed it unnecessary to note scrupulously all the variations in spelling in common language words, all inversions of words in a single sentence, or all these minor details which would make the variant list as extensive as the book itself. Perhaps some readers will think we could have pruned it even further. On the contrary, for proper names and expressions not in common use, we believed our scruple could not be too great. However, even in this regard, it seems sufficient to state here, once and for all, that the traveller's name himself always printed Courtier by Lescarbot and followed by the Literary and Historical Society of Quebec is consistently written Cartier in our manuscripts. Mr. Francois DeWitt was the task of noting the variants which are listed below by the new editor. The comparative indication we gave above regarding the content of each manuscript and its lacunae dispenses us from going into detail about it in the senses that follows. Since the general agreement between the three manuscripts would lead to a nearly perpetual repetition in this list of all three letters, A, B, C combined, we have substituted for them the single indication manuscripts, which, strictly speaking, would be superfluous if one is only concerned with correcting simple typographical errors. Among these, there is one that occurs so constantly it can be signaled and blocked by a general nota. This concerns all designations of points on the compass rose where the word west appears, more frequently written in our manuscripts and consistently printed by the typographer of 1545 as and honest. Our references are explained as follows. A first digit initially refers to the leaf of our printed text, while one of the italic minuscules or be accompanying it specifies whether it's on the recto or verso of that leaf. The following new digit, whether single or double, indicates the lines to refer to. Then the word or series of words in the text where a variant or correction is applied, is repeated, and placed opposite a separated dash. Any observation or annotation from our end is carefully enclosed in parentheses. Here, therefore, is the comprehensive result of our revision to 11 declination B. C-13 is autres others, B3 escality equality B. For Suffiquil est, it's enough that he existed B. Suffiquil y est C9. 10 quelques genres O SB says, some kinds of species B. Twi 12 their nature, their natures B. Par levi for life, B 18 ils dient. They have said B, they therein serve. C 19 ad affirmed B. Tros inhabiti is 3 uninhabited B. 3 one solstice is ad for the great heat reflection of the sun. B 2 these tests des habitants des cell zenith of the said zone. B 9 pensant. True vent. True they think. They find BC 10 hour, or B saying 11 decilli of these, B12 utra today of 16 dix, I say B18 ungmot, a brief word, BC. B7 deals of itself, C7-8 all adventure, BC11 sanctify most holy faith, BC 12 days from these 14 league, I allege, BC. Parsi for this B, 16 recounts, recognize B, retire, C, 17 faked, makes a B for a tuduqual of which B through I'm unfoible in my simple B, 4 placed pleases B, 6 estans habitants sabs, standing living under BT9 et, have had B he, 12 sancta most holy BT, 13 al A to the BC. 17 al Occident to the west, B1 sanct most holy. BK3 for eclipse, B 5 months to sa clara display its clarity BC. 8-9 apostats imitateurs de Mahomet. These words are not found in the manuscript. B9-10 in the day and another day by day. B10 oppress, B obscure, B4 B12 gave BC. 18 poor princes, B a poor C5-9 innumerable BC, B2 descend, B send 3 perme among B say 8 our holy dictate, our most holy dictate, B our most holy C. The 11 this present book, C11, 12 all the things, B16, 17 lands, the manuscript B adds dangerous rocks and the resources of those lands. Say they 3 in the said year, A 16 with the aforesaid 3 manuscripts, 17 about the approximately manuscripts, 18 the aforementioned, 19 Frosman from manuscripts, 21 Montreal manuscripts, Montreal, Will Manseville's Q, 23 J. Han Pullet. This name does not appear in any of the 3 manuscripts nor in L. It is an obvious insertion that repeats at various points in the narrative and remains exclusively restricted to the printed text of 1545. 23 the second manuscripts, 25 about approximately manuscripts, 27 a third, 1/3, and smaller manuscripts, 1 Emerlin manuscripts, 2-3 the Breton, Le Breton, A, C, the Breton B, 420, 26 manuscripts, 7 opposite scripts, that never manuscripts, A, the C, the said C manuscripts. 6B15 here begins a new paragraph in all 3 manuscripts, 21 which one C, 7A1 of manuscripts, the Abbey, the Bay manuscripts, 3 deviants, we should go manuscripts, ornamented with the manuscripts. 17, and which manuscripts, 18 the aforesaid of the aforementioned manuscripts, 28 Great Bays manuscripts, 2 Martra manuscripts, 6 West manuscripts, 6-7 St. Martha's Islands, St. Guillaume's Islands, and others that remain ornamented with the islands of St. Martha manuscripts, 11 across manuscripts, 13 of which Cap manuscripts, 16 Martra manuscripts, AA4 Norwest, about approximately manuscripts, 6 and for this reason manuscripts, 9 we go searching manuscripts, 15 for a great cross, manuscripts. 19 and is missing, it must be C, 23 several good habiles, several habiles manuscripts, 25 vai manuscripts, 27 from above manuscripts. 1 here is the translated text with proper names preserved, Chuseronist, Susuruest. 4 Su, from Sum is a passage, Vents, Scavoit passage. Time, could Mr. 15 dosism, the 13th is Luninde Seronist of Suest. 8B26 Lön and Preston Canada the previous year to Canada AB preceding year. Tick from that. C Dudicta Bay commensurate began as 9-11 dunk. So Mies 1450 onest Seronest west southwest. Mies 19 Mari midday Mies. 23 Devers from the shore, Mies 2-4 halt is Gisant low, lying Mies 25 2-6 donest, uncut disseronest, west a quarter of Suest, Mies 2-8 habitable, Mies B6 Grant, Silent, great river of Silent, Mies. SM they resai sent they Mies Awis Kur and since, Mies. 9 Dils sweet from that river, Mies Norroit, would not hacks, 15 Laris della dictiter cost the rest coast AB, 24 VOR to see Mies Noster, AB. Sir honest, Suest, Mies. 10-2 Disu from Sioux, Mies 17 della league from that land, Mies 24 savages men, Mies 27 T has written 23, B9 Bon Rad a good roats, Mies Vinct up to 20 Mies. 10 Sablon of San, Mies 12 Bruins. Fazoy and Brambles were making Mies 13 Xie Dudic Mois on the 23rd day of that month added, we set sail, and we traveled by sea until the 29th of that same month, B22 Sun. It sound Mies 26 Surones Usrues Mies. 20 married, tied ems, len one les namasms, the names, Mies Tintresms we arrived, C, 5 best, load, Mies, feel honest, sir, honest, suest, luest, rented, is 16 du fluve, from the river Mies, 18 Saguenay of Saguenay, Mies the 90 T savages men, Mies, 22 non-obstant, notwithstanding, Mies 25 2-6 quai, Arbro, who, such a tree, Mies. Be 2 barques des savages, lescals venoyant vernus, in grand pure, boats of the savages, who came to us in great fear, from Canada, coming to fish for sea wolves and other fish. And as we were moored in that river, 2 of those boats approached our ships, arriving with great trepidation. For friculate they return a B departed, C7, A7 safely to shore, Ms. 12 mares, tide, 50 expresses. Here is the translated text with preserved name, Jacques 2 and 3 brasses, 17 of this stench, disappointing, Mes LQ transcribed, disappointing. 23 honest systems. There's 26 the river, Ms. 12, 1, 2 passages, Ms. 3 in the morning at dawn, Ms. 8 marins, Mahaux ends L red morux, TQ red morus. Evan BA Nistra istok Mies, LTQ red uniformly I stock 12, the aforementioned river, the said river, Mies 12, 14 shallows ford, Mies 16 river or country, Mies 25 Adarthas as previously written. Ab said C, B20 their season. The seasons of which will be spoken afterward in this text is anchor, Mies 22, 23 wild men, C. 25 they wanted, they wished, C 28, Tagnogni LQ read, Tagnogni 13, 2 to make great joy do much cheer, Mies 3 to speak part, Mies 9, 10 of the country of the aforementioned country, Mies 11 chair, Chairi, Mies 12 2 either of the said boats, C Mies 28 is, B2 and Dom Agaya Ab 6 that they which they Mies 7 was the aforesaid Lord, Ab was he, C10, then and then said Lord, and then our aforesaid C19, the aforesaid Egahana, the aforesaid Lord, C. 20 and likewise did Ms. our aforesaid C21, his boats, our boats, Ms. 22 upstream, Ms. 26 end of them, end at Ms. 27 anchor a fork in T Elku, Ms. 14 afore the aforesaid place, the aforementioned river, C12 nursery trees, fruit trees, me 15 fine and good, Ms. 19 our aforesaid C. 25 children omitted in C, Ms. B5 glass, Ms. 9 joy, feast C welcome, Ms. 17 Hinanda commanded, Ms. 23 strong beautiful trees like chains, palms, cedars, and other boys, Ms. 26. By this means, for this reason, Ms. 15 one batches, baskers, C, 2, 3 land to see, but it is landertree, but it is C. 6 made, Ms. 9 on the 14th, on the following day 14, Ms. of this month of September, C16, the Ms. 22, disappointments from them, Ms. our aforesaid C, 26 then. And then Ms. 27, the following day, here is the translated text with the name preserved as Jacques the 15. The captain, Jack, landed with several, and the next day, on the 15th of that month, Captain Jacques, accompanied by many of his men, landed. 28 Balifes markers, Balices, Mies, 15B to the place, we found a place, Ms. 3 several, a great number of, 3, 4 others, between others, 7, 1, Duda referring to Jack, without that, no, without any Mies. 14 others, other members of their group, C, 15 and B20, to which they responded, to whom he responded, Mies 21, his it, referring to the response as 21, 22, they would leave, they left Mies. 24 the said captains, Mies 26, then B 28, and before Mies 16 at 3, Donnacona altogether together with Donnacona, Donnacona altogether C. 7 and the next day, the following day beginning a new paragraph in the manuscripts, 11 to the Sedalega to Hokalega, Mies 15 Domagaya with Mies 16 little children, Mies 19 feasting and receiving according to their condition, celebrating and indulging as befits them. Ms. 22, 23 he did not want, he would not allow. Ms. 23 allied, joined with him as he had promised. Ms. B1 wanting, wished. Ms. 3, 4 they would only go and come to the said, they would only go see. Ms. 7 and the next day. These words begin a new paragraph in the manuscripts. 13, the said ones, our said ones. Ms. 18, 19, great agitation, a great commotion. Ms. 19, 20, 10 to 12 years old. About 10 years old, Ms. 23, cries and hurlings of screams. Means. 17 at 1 then, and then Ms. 3, the said Lord Donnacona. Ms. 17 at 9, they left him to go, would allow him to try going to Hochelaga. Ms. 14 to go in order to go B. 19 for a basin of iron plain, for a plain iron basin. C. It's 27, the said Captain Donnacona, our captain, the said captain. Ms. B, 7 ships and men of ships. Ends 11, and in front, and previously Ms. 15 of which some had remained, whose companions were still there. Ms. 17 with great haste, as if we had wanted to, with such haste that it seemed we desired. 18 at 3 to Hochelaga, to the said Hochelaga. 445 them, they made them dress. Ms. 11 and their band came, then came with their band B, hey, 12 whom, referring to the band C. 16 all of boys, all of them, 17, the say I said ones, be 18, 19, it started, 20, he desired, Ms. 21, to which he responded, to which he answered, Ms. Here is the translated text with preserved name, Jack is, he responded, Jack's Tegnogni, he answered, C24, appearing, Ms. B7, distant from those ships, 10-11 being retired, Ms. 14 Domagaya with those men, Ms. 27, what? 19 on Kudoni, Ms. also read in Liltako, 4 would have, 19 A5, they died, 7 Kudragni Kudoni fell. 10 and then, be 14 of those words about those things, Ms. 15 they greatly thanked, they returned back, Ms. 25 for by Abbey. B1 to Hochelaga, at Hochelaga. C3, the captain to him, Ms. 5 by 4, Ms. 14 in September, add as it is said, Ms. 15, 16, with the said galleon, Ms. 20 united, joined Ms. 21 more beautiful, much more beautiful, Ms. 23 they possessed, 20 I1, their grapes, C2, a great number, many, Ms. 3 on the said, on that shore, Ms. 4, all good fish according to the seasons, Ms. 12, Achele, Achele, C, Aculasi, Achelasi TQ. 15 they came, Ms. 17 it made, it did, Ms. 21 upstream a month, Ms. 24 children add in gift, Ms. 25 from 7 to 8, from 8 to 9, Ms. They refused, they rejected, Ms. B1 present add of which the said Lord thanked the captain, Ms. 2 that very one, A 5 the 19th, that very 19th B, the 19th C, 10 to the most beautiful, the beautiful ones, Ms. 11 nuts add pines, 20 B 12 bullets, Sandra's bulks, soldiers, Muse bells, sauls, Q 13 vide, which is the best, 15 all loaded up, 18 sirens, Rauks, gorges, sirens, Lionels, Rossignals, others, twin the said 18, the said XV, Mies. 24 upstream, on the said lake, Mies, twin A5, these Mies, that very one there, Ms. 11 from deep, add depth, 13, 14 Vismas, Ms. 15 to 3 Mies. All of them, these words begin a new paragraph in Ab 1819 upstream a month, Ms. 27, lightly as it had done, AB, B2 heap pile, 2-3 which live who go mims. 4 good to wonders, add here is the translated text with the name preserved as Jacques Emenja, Ab 13 left, BC 16. The following day LQ add 20, 9th of September. 19 they could being able to mess 24 those same mess 25 from some parts of mess 22 at one of the bridge of Pont Briand mess. 3 the name of Jehan Pullet does not appear in any of the 3 mess. 4 Jalabert Abbey 5-6 under the captain of the other 2 ships under said Cartier, A B under said captain, C 22 at 9/10 the second, mess 11 from the place where mess 12 about 45, approximately 45, mess during which period, during that time, see. 19 other small things, other minor supplies, 26, the women from the other side and the children of the other, and the women from their group and the children from the other side, meese. 27 and after this, and C, B2, which ones, C8 chair, dear, miss. They bring the women theirs. 12 good collection, goodwill. Be 14 some small boats, certain ones, meese. 16 of these, of the said boats, mess. 19 as closely as possible, miss. 22 at 2 men, sailors, B. 4 from the B, 10 therein, miss. 16, 18 possible and more beautiful land, and better than one could see, possible to see the most beautiful land best, possible among the most beautiful lands in the world. C23 town Adra of Hochelaga, miss. 27 what we did then, and then the said Lord, the said Agohana, C B7 cross, add remembrance of a crucifix, miss, S 23 B6 situated positioned, miss. 25 of length from long, C26 of tall trees, of the height, miss. 27 there isn't, C24 at 3 pebbles. For mess, 9 wide mess. 11 sturgeons ace, a type of fish, mess areas, uku, 13 place hal, mess, 14 they live, mess, 15 there's mess, 22 they crowd, they pack, mess, 20 eternal acts, there's total, be one thick of thick ones, miss, they also have me thrish, add to no eels, others, 9, 10 wild animal skins from which they make their clothing coverings of skins of which they make their garments. No luyas, martins, foxes, wild cats, bears. Serfs others here's is the translation of the text while preserving the name Jacques' savages, but most of them are almost entirely naked. For luyas has it as is Laura's, T uses lovers. Q writes laws, and for beavers, meaning rabbits, T reads cheevers. 11, 12 Esergni, Inogni, Esnani, BCL, having Q, have Esnani, T as Vagni, 7 Fessin, Fesses, miss 18 Oleas Leaks, miss 25 to 1 and font, Ni font, miss 3 Ni font, Nia, mess. 25 to 11 chose added that the said captain haven't do B, say 13 apropos, thus mess 20 place, grand place, C22, audically you add what we said, mess 3, 24 fills femmes, all women and girls, mess. 26 frutter to kiss a B3ness in us, mess 4 allures their sayings, a sodane, immediately, mess 9 cheskan each one, mess 15, agohana, 18, opres near, 23 Lincoln to around, mess. 26, proclus weak and sick. Me says 28 lures in there. Mies 26 to 2 lie pheasant sign, pleading with him, telling him 3 quil lie plus les, that he wants the ab toucher, as if he had asked for protection and health. Mess ad liqual capitaine les frota, and at once the captain began to rub his arms and legs. Mess 21, sanctify ad of the passion of our Saviour. Mess 23, pair pair, mess. 25, lila, mess B. 21, a saver, no taste of salt. Miss 23, manger, to repast. Miss 27, to 2 there is miss. 6, qual est, that he is miss 10 or quilve, where it goes, miss. 27 to 11, quil est, that it be miss 12 passer to pass. And let us behold this river, miss is river, 60 environ around, miss 8, 19, quinasa voyant conduit, who were present, C. 23, par fort, de lang. These words, all 3 sing in all says 25 lies. Leaves, miss B3, royal kingdom and province. 5, say 7, distoit, was miss 8, nos companions mariners, our sailors, miss 10, yaya, there was miss 10-11 go John go Judah. Miss T reads a going to 12 sant, where Miss is 22 demand and asking, 8-24 it monstrant showed. There's 28 to 26 I sell that river, Miss. Nature, its depths in nature, Miss. Here is the English translation, preserving the name Jack is what me's 28 and May. Me's B 3 odict, Habel, B 6 came Beaky, 10 odict, Habel, Abel, a C. 16 and others to the others, Ms. 18 all the power of the country, Mies. 22 others who made a marvelous feast for our captain, pretending to have great joy at our arrival, which others to see the said captain they made a marvelous feast, feigning to be joyful at his arrival, which likewise Mies. 28b 26 the said Lord, Abby 2901 to go, Mies to Canada Mies 8 distant of a league from the place where. Half a league Mies. 14 women and girls see, 20 each one Mies 25 ewes, yew tree Mies it was shown to us, Ab 26 to the said captain, Ab 27 of men, Mies B 111 Truman's all men's men T1 from Mies. 3 we were told, beyond what we were told, 7 Gedo, Hong Nido, Ella, 16, 17 we retired, we withdrew Mies to God willing, to one another, Mez. 23 Kudu-Agni Mies 24 who speaks, Mies 30 are 5, and they went, sen all these things, 9, 17 Kudu-Agni, Mies 10 it was said that he, Mies 13 this one here, Mies 17 Agagajonda Gojuda, Mies 23 complaining, Mies. 25 to 6 we will return, we will go back, Mies B1, what was done to him, what was done by the captain, Mies 4, very joyful, thanked him, Mies 30 B5 in community, almost in community, Mies. 6 they are all dressed, Mies 9, what they make of skins, these words are missing in the 3 mess, 11, they're his, Mies 12, never peeled, never skin them, Mies. 14 from the handle of a knife, from the blade of a Ab 25, level Ab, 3-1 a 5 Ozozisi Mies, Siv the same of this same land, Ab of a similar land, C. 7 they possess, as 9 from in, Mies 15, a place, Mies 25 tried experienced, Ab, blind all naked, almost all naked, Mies. 9-10 it is very credible. Here is the translation of the provided text, preserving the name Jack was incredible, Ms. Home 13 hours, Martras, Malders, and others, and ours from whom we receive. But very little they are very greedy, and sea-wicked with their provisions. 17 it seems to me. 18 to tame, add in such a way and manner that one could 20 between the chapter that just ended and the one starting at the bottom of the same page. The edition of 1545 reproduced in this volume has a gap of 2 chapters contained in the 3 manuscripts of the Imperial Library. They could be immediately inserted here, but it will be more convenient for the reader to find them at the end of this appendix outside of the detailed review that occupies us right now. 20 River, generally, BC. 30A4, the surest, the deepest and surest, Miss 8 from Saguenay, Miss 9 boats, banks, Miss 11 many, a great number of AB, 13 to land, and on land, Miss. B5, the end, the bout, Mess 6 drown a fork, Mess 9 wide large, Mess 12 as no man has ever seen, that it is possible to see, Ab 13 from Donnacona of Lord Donnacona, Ab 18 Aristanato joist, Starnet and Miss 19 sated in Lelteku, 24 they remain Miss 25, 28, and the dwelling place and people of Tiquinondahi who are on a mountain, and the city of Hochley, which Hochley is a wide land, is the dwelling place of the people of Tiquinonde and Hochley, which Tiquinonde is on a mountain, and the other in a wide country, Miss. and 33 are 13 animals. We saw there the tracks of an animal that has only 2 feet, which we followed for a long time over the sand, and mud, which has feet like this, and large as a palm tree and more, mess. 30, 6 and 17 of those animals, but 17, none others, no others, 21, 1 porcupines, terns, mess, 27 memory of man, mess. 6 and 11 Canada you will find in June, July and August many macquarials, mullets, bars, sartras, large eels and other fish. Having passed their season, you will find the pelican as good as on the St. River. Then at the New Year there are many lampreys and salmon. Beyond this Canada there are many brochets, truits, carp, braves and other sweet fish, and of all kinds of fish. This people makes great fishing for their substance and provisions, mess. 15 arrive, mess. 18 closer, the closest, ac. 22, 23, Donnacanaga, Tagnogni, Domagaya, mess. 25 further, father. Here is the translated text with preserved name. Jack was longing, Ms. 3405, Kemendudict, Chimin, and more sure is by said. Ms. Sisai Hokalaga, above Hokalaga, Ms. 18 entering, Ms. 19 lakhs DA, very broad, Ms. 34A 26 add with their boats from Sainte-Croix, Ms. 27 Awaya, there is Ms. B 3 Pums, Ms. Plum is 5 Fen and inhabitants, Ms. 8 Silwaya Void, if there were Ms. 9 last time, I estimate Ms. 11 Marches, Murches, Ms. 12 malady, disease and mortality, B key for taught imbuers, remove, Ms. infected Q22 9 and not Ms. 26 delir and there Ms. 35 high 6 tout owl, Ms. 17 variant, stood seeing, Ms. B 4 low mess dight Kelly Bree, the said mast and sung, Ms. 6 dame, the lady who makes prayer at, Ms. 10 Ving darks and 20 years, Ms. 11 Nasistoit was to us, Ms. 13 connaissance, no knowledge, Mr. 21 infect, and infected Ms. 27, 28 a milks to the best, Ms. 3601 pardon forgives, 9 poor son companion for the others, Ms. 22, 33 Phasoi, he was making Ms. 24 do fort from the strong, Ms. B3 Dunner to give or to share, Ms. 4 Cruin Beliebies, 6 Calis of Pebbles, Ms. 17 places glazed, Ms. 37 one avoid, there was Ms. 10 contenate, Dudek contains, have said Ms. 37 A11 durant equal temps, during which time, with 14 Ushans add, which would die from the aforementioned disease, Ms. 24, 25 Garras, a reservoir UC Dudet Arbor healed and covered all his patients with health after using said tree, beat C. 37 B4 to horse do fort outside the strong, C8 dicks since 10, Ms. 9 diladicti of the very same Ms. Now 12 tutout, al, Ms. 16 deliber, healed, deliberated, C17 heal estot, he's making it was made order, help Ms. 21 cool avoid, that he had Ms. 22 dunt, of which he Ms. 23 chistoid, was Ms. 39A 3 femmes added with the captain, Ms. 4 lesquels, which one Ms. 9 10 tote malady, all diseases, Ms. 11 amidada, as anda la q, 9 count incontinent right away, Ms. and 24 cinco, then 5, Ms. 27 ledict, the said one Ms. B1, 2, quay here is the translated text with preserved name Jack's chestnut tree that was in France, a tree that I have never seen before in 6 days, in less than 8 days perhaps. Donnacona, BC. Others added left from Stadacone, BC. They were the ones who went BC. They wanted to win. They laid the claim to triumph. Miss 39, 10 they would have, they should have Miss 18. They loved to prevail. They laid claim to victory. Miss 39 from the sick man to the sick person BC. To see him, towards him BC, they said we're told Miss 7, dear, precious, Miss 21 towards Miss 22. It would be, was Miss 24, who gave us doubt, through whom I had suspicion, Miss 26, servant, added, named Charles Guyot, who was more than any other below the people of the whole country, Mess. accompanied by Jean Pullet. These words are not in any of the 3 manuscripts, nor in L, that who Mess 41-2 made up false stories about Pullet, and the servant, the aforementioned servant, making up lies, Mess he had stayed Mess. 3. At their city. These words are missing in all 3 manuscripts. Which one? Miss 4-5, brought him a small present, brought him no present, Mess, his arrival, his coming, Mess. 6. He laid down, saying to the aforementioned servant that he was very sick, Mess. After he went, Messes. He found Mess. One did not, Mess. Make him this pleasure, make him happy, Miss. And that the aforementioned servant, he 41, told Mess also, and also Mess. The said Lord added Donnacona, Mess, occidental, Miss, Piquimians, Mess Piquiniox, L, Piquinians, T, Piquimens, L. The aforementioned Pullet and servant made him there. The servant made his Miss 21, would have liked Miss 41-4, Sickadin, Stadin, Ab, C, Stadadin, Litiku. Finally, but in the end, Ab, the children boys, Ab, of that place, from that place, Mess, the said Lord, the Lord be, solemnity of the feast, solemn and festive, Miss 42-16, he would enter, go there, they would enter C, and 2 others, and 2 more, Mess. The aforementioned capture, Mess. Retire, remove them all here is the translated text with preserved name as retirers. Jacques is 17 guard, Jotez, Lee, Dict, Segner as compagnons. Ab. Jack is 27 Hurlant, Eulant, Ab, 4301, Agohanna, Miss. Jack is 3 Nile Lendemain, Nile Matin, Miss. Jack is 14 Roy de France, Jotez Saint-Matre, Miss. Jack is 16 Ultras, Leax, Miss. Jack is 24, D'Entendre par fault de lang, D.A. crier par faute de l'entendre. Mess 25, Vincent, Mess B, 2 commensurant, rent affair. Mess. Jacks 5, Diasurgni d'Inogni, Ab Desnogni C. Jacks 11, 12 commander, Le commander, Ab Jacks 12, the Lendemain, Sis Motsni, Sont Dans, Orkandis, Troyes, Mess. Jackie 15 Pazels, Pale, Ab Bales, Q. 44 6 Le Cinquiesm, Le Lendemain Cinquiesm, Miss Jacks 11, Ils Estoin, Y Estoint, Miss as Jacks 17 Estra, E Apraptazantry, Ab. Jacks 18 Le, C Mancdans Les, Miss Jacks 26 Mace Quill, Qui Mace Quill, Ab, B2 Desurgni, Desnogni, Miss Jacks 3 4 Le People, Tutley People, Mess. Jacks 7 and 8 Vinsmas, a Jotez, Poser, or Basdil Lidorli, Ans, Environdos Lees de Sainte-Croix, Illy de Mancha Vinsmas, Miss Jacks 9, or Cesiasma, or Londex VI, Mess. Jacks 23 Unvoix, Tus Avan Voix, Mess. Jacks 27 Du Saguene, did it Saguene, missed 45, the 1 de Snugni, Miss Jacks 5, Ledic Capitaine, Jotez, Puis in Rituarant. Li passage plus croret milor entre li nord ladite filacour vers li sudpora li grand nombre disbasses, banks, roaches, quae sont ossi quia petit fond. Miss Jack 16 parsi, Miss Jack is 21 or 21, XX I Joe, Miss 45 or 23, Hongdo, a Jotez, Antra LED, l'Assumption, Ledded Hongido, Miss 25, La Treva, Justice, La Travers, Miss 2060, Lobay, de Labay, Miss. B1 Vesmis Vinsums, Mess 2 Secret Vulians, a Miss Jack is 2-3, Pour Lobrigi, or La Barge, Ab. Jack's 15, Isil, Mer, Mess. Jack is 16, Changeaway, Charge It, Mess. Jack's 21, Dux, Lius Demi, Vinct, Dux, Lius Demi, Mess. Jack is 23, Houts, Dimmer Ultras. Demerorient, Mess. 24 Arains, Jazi, Diemphiemi, Lesdets, Arains, Aintree, Lalada Ter, Quias Ter, Haut, Unziae, Trater, Certain. Si Rebatant on Norues, Miss. 46 1 arrive as Mseli Jer, Nas Soms arrive is si Jerle, Miss. Jacques 20 on ast, Noronais the un vingt trois lius, os norowaist 2 free 4 lius, mies, Jacques 28 rognos, mes. Here is the translation of the text with the name preserved as Jacques. 17 Honekon, see. Jack 19 in the Herndake, Abindake, see. Jacques 23 Assam, miss. Jack is 25 Agoisi, AB 47, B2 Hegageda. See Jack 6 Oswash Isnak, see Jacques 13 Costes, Jack is 14 Agoskan, mess. 47-17, Legin AB, Jacks. The rest of the text continues with variations and additional words, including notes on missing articles and their placement in the vocabulary complement. Here is the translation of the provided text with the name preserved as Jack's incollated findings, Evam 47, 48, 24, 25, beard on the chin, O stone, mess. Jack, as beard on the face, Agason, miss Jack, testicles, sister, miss 4 Fabiason, 7B60, 17 Bushy, Asquisco, Arab, Asquisco, see Jack, small nuts, Undaganaha, miss Jack is 24, 25 olives, Haukahanda, miss for a 910, it means nothing, Kahani Kwahakui, miss. Jack, teen 30, 14 feathers, Heckin, missed Jack's 25 to 6. When they want to say goodbye to someone, they say, hey Gaghaniga, miss Jack singing, they guhoka. Jack's laughing, Kahazim, miss Jack is crying, Agamenda, miss. Jack is dancing, the Goaka see. 4B, 45, sweet water. A, miss Jack's 11, 12, greet mushroom, Adgiance. See Jack's my friend, Agnice, miss Jack's run the dothody, miss. Jack's 13, 14, hurts my eyes, Qui quanoig iguda, miss. Jack, someone has died, came Dane, miss. Jack is 16, 17, note that their lord is named Donnacona, always read Donnacoa, and when they want to call him lord, they call him Aguhana, see. Jacks, when they want to insult someone, they call them Agojuda, which means wicked traitor, Agojuda, mess. Jack is villain, Agase, miss. Jacks, they call the grass they use in their horns during hunting season, Quiecta, miss Jack's common grass, Hanada, see. Jackis, there are large rats in that land, as big as badgers, which smell of musk, and they call them Hab. Jack is 20, 21, my cousin Hige, Mrs. Jack's my nephew Enadin. Jack's my wife Yaisa, miss. Jack's my child, go, miss Jack's, walk Quedak, see. Jack is come here, Canada Undagany, see. Jack's give this to someone taken on to sea. Jack's keep me, Sodinadega Muscani, see. Jack's where is Heshi gone? A Quinhosnan, see. Jack's close the door, a Snodian, see. Jack go fetch some water, Sagatham, see. Jack's go fetch someone, Axtascone. Istay, Jack is behazy, mies. Jack's small Esterhags a mess. Jack's fat, Hauganda, miss Jack's scaly Hakuhin, Hakuin, see. Jack's evening, Ango, see. Jack's night, Ohina, see. Jack is day, Adayahan, see. Jackis, when they want to make some exclamation, they say Agondek, Ab. Here ends the detailed review of the variants offered by the manuscripts and editions of Cartier's second voyage to Canada. We have referred back to this place for additions to be made. In the 1545 edition, represented by this volume, the 2-chapter omitted in the copy carefully enriched on the contrary of the deeds and doings of the important figure Jehan Paulet, on which this primitive edition was executed. It only presents, indeed, a total of 20 chapters to be divided into 2 parts of 10 chapters each, between which the 2 forgotten chapters must properly be intercalated. As the said people brought us fish day by day, and had goods on board our ships, and as by the advice of Tagnogni and Domagaya, the said people withdrew from coming, and as there was no dispute between us and them, and day after day the said people came to our ships, bringing many eels and other fish to exchange for our merchandise, for which they paid with coarse cloth, waistbands, paternosters, and other small things, of which they were quite content. But we noticed that the two mean men we brought told them, and made it understood that what we gave them was worth nothing, and that they would soon have hatchets as well as coarse cloth for what we gave them. Although the captain had made many presents to them, and they did not cease asking the captain at all times, which was advised by a lord of the city of Hagenchenda to take care of Donnacona, and said two mean men who were still traitors. And also warned by some in Canada, and that we noticed their malice because they wanted to withdraw the 3 children that the said Donnacona had given to the captain, and indeed made one of the daughters run away from the ship, after which the captain took care to reinforce the others. And by the advice of Taignoagny and Domagaya they abstained, and did not come with us for 4 or 5 days, unless some who came in great fear. The captain, doubtful that they might not be thinking of any treachery, reinforced the fort all around with deep and wide ditches, a drawbridge, and reinforcement of wooden walls, contrary to the first ones, and it was ordered for night watch for the time to come 50 men in 4 shifts, and at each change the trumpets sounding, which was done according to the said order. And the said Donnacona, Taignoagny, Domagaya, being warned of the reinforcement and the good guard and watch that was made, were enragedly disappointed with the captain, and sent several times their men pretending to be elsewhere to see if they caused them displeasure, from which we did not pay any attention, and no sign was shown. And they came, the said Donnacona, Taignoagny, Domagaya, and others. Sometimes the captain was spoken to by one of them about a river between their settlements, asking if he was married and why he hadn't come to Canada to visit them. The said captain responded that they were only traitors and wicked people, as had been reported to him, and that he had seen them in various ways, as if they had promised to go to Hochelaga and retrieve the daughter given to him, and other bad tricks they played, but for all their desire to be good men and forget their evil intentions, he forgave them and assured them they could safely come aboard to enjoy a good meal, as before. From these words the said captain was thanked, and they promised to return the daughter, who had fled to him within 3 days. On the 4th day of November, Dom Aja, accompanied by 6 others, informed the captain that Donnacona had left to search for the aforementioned daughter in the countryside, and that she would be brought to him the following day. They also said that Taignoagny was very sick, and begged the captain to send them some salt and bread, which he did. He instructed them to tell Taignoagny that it was Jesus who was angry with him for the wicked tricks he had tried to play. The next day, Donnacona, Taignoagny, Domagaya, and several others arrived with the daughter, presenting her to the captain. He refused to accept her, saying he didn't want her, and ordered them to take her back. They apologized, explaining that they hadn't advised her to leave, but that the natives had driven her away, as she had told them. They begged the captain to recover her, and themselves brought her to the ship. After these events the captain ordered food and wine, and held a feast, then granted them permission to depart. And so they came and went from our ships, staying with them in as much affection as before. End of project Gutenberg's Voyage of J. Cartier to Canada by Cartier. And so they came and went from our ships, staying with them in as much affection as before. End of project Gutenberg's Voyage of J. Cartier to Canada by Cartier.